My Marvel superhero girlfriend, welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 26, New York, Sure a Field Doesn't Exist. New York, the world-renowned economic capital of the United States, boasts skyscrapers lining the streets, dazzling LED billboards. Today is another peaceful day. How could it be otherwise? Every half hour, the vibrant sirens echo through the bustling streets, evoking a vibrant atmosphere of freedom. In fact, since Tony Stark publicly revealed his identity as Iron Man over a year ago, New York, home to the Stark Industries headquarters, has become much more peaceful. After all, before committing a crime here, criminals can't be sure if the billionaire playboy will suddenly don his dazzling steel suit and descend from the sky at Mach speeds, blasting them to the ground. While everyone knows Tony Stark rarely punishes petty crimes like bank robberies, the despairing lack of power that leaves no chance of escape once confronted still instills fear in many criminal gangs. True to the current advertising slogan, in 2011, technology makes the world a better place. Iron Man, the king of cutting-edge technology. His immense superheroic power is, in some ways, even more formidable than that of a city police officer. At this moment, Tony Stark, known as Iron Man, Playboy, and Trillionaire, among other titles, is at a famous New York nightclub, surrounded by a group of curvaceous dancers and models in minimal clothing. Tony, can you please not hold serious meetings in places like this? His friend, U.S. Army Colonel James Rhodes, was speechless. He struggled to squeeze through the crowd of women to get to Tony Stark's side, his imposing, neat uniform a stark contrast to the surroundings. But his title of colonel was enough to intimidate many, and only after Rhodes's arrival did the women disperse from the flamboyant Stark. Changing the location is impossible, never in this lifetime. But could you please stop wearing that outfit? It really ruins the atmosphere and the mood, Stark teased, casually picking up a glass of red wine and swishing it. I just snuck out of the base, Rhodes said, then took a glass of red wine from a passing waiter and toasted with Stark. The lights were blaring, the sound system was blasting. Rhodes, intoxicated by his drink, had quickly absorbed the moment. What are you looking for, so late at night? Stark asked casually. Oh, I almost forgot. Rhodes shuddered, looked at his friend seriously, and lowered his voice. Haven't you been looking for someone with extraordinary talents or incredible powers for the past 6 months? Indeed, Stark nodded frankly. He hadn't hidden his idea of forming a superhero team from his friend. If Rhodes wasn't a military officer, which often prevented him from acting independently, he'd undoubtedly be one of them. How is it going? Rhodes asked curiously. Not bad, I think. We've already got 2 or 3 candidates. Though Stark's tone remained casual, Rhodes could sense his frustration. In reality, Stark had only found one candidate, a recent find. The other 2 were suggested by the director of SYNOPSIS. Fortunately, the person he found, both in terms of intelligence and strength, was unmatched by the average person. This was the only thing that could comfort Stark. Despite the vastness of the world, humans possessing abilities exceeding those of ordinary humans are still very rare. What do you think of that new superhero, the silver-haired goddess, who emerged in Washington? She defeated the Hulk clone, the Abomination. Rhodes asked with interest. Of course, I had Jarvis check it out that night. Stark spread his hands, narrowing his eyes. Although there's not much information, I'm sure she lives in Washington. Times Square was bustling with people, Christmas tree decorations were everywhere, and the festive atmosphere enveloped the entire city. Nian, what do you think of this? Gwen, wearing a Santa hat, asked, tugging on Nian's sleeve. Nian, it looks good. Senior, what about this one of mine? Kara touched the reindeer bell around her neck, and it rang with a crisp, melodious metallic sound. Nian, it looks good. Gwen and Kara, accompanied by their helper, Nian, strolled through the bustling commercial streets, the 2 beautiful women a beautiful part of the city's landscape. While being surrounded by beautiful women was a pleasant experience, Nian hadn't forgotten his business. Reaching an intersection, Nian suggested, "Okay, I'll take this street, and you two will take that." Huh? Gwen's smile faded. "Why?" Kara asked, a puzzled expression on her face. "Gwen, have you forgotten? You came here ahead of time to do some tourist research." Nian gestured, "The streets are so vast, you'll never be able to explore them all. Why don't we split up, each taking one side? You and Kara can stay together, and that'll keep you safe." Gwen's mind went blank. She never expected her earlier excuse would backfire. "Senior." Kara looked up, about to say something, but was met with Nian's smile. "Then I'll leave it to you, Kara. You and Gwen, take care of each other's safety." Kara's mouth opened, wanting to speak. "You're the most vulnerable, aren't you?" Unable to utter a refusal, she reluctantly agreed, "Okay. Then it's settled." Nian, clutching his school bag, walked off alone toward a street. Gwen and Kara, left behind, staring at each other in bewilderment. How could things have turned out like this? Nian, taking photos with his phone, walked down one street. He walked for an unknown amount of time until a building caught his eye. It was a memorial hall. Adult tourists and their children came and went, some clutching plastic pentagram-shaped round shields, their eyes filled with excitement and longing. Seeing this distinctive scene, it was clear what kind of memorial hall this was. The Captain America Memorial Hall. As humanity's first superhero, Captain America's influence in this country is undeniable, even though he died in a plane crash over half a century ago. Even within the military, many American soldiers still consider him a role model. Nian had only heard of him before, but this was his first time seeing the Captain America Memorial. It's a must-see New York tourist attraction. Nian was standing at the entrance steps, debating whether to go in for a tour, when a tall young man emerged. The white man was wearing casual pants, a jacket, and a low-brimmed baseball cap. He lowered his head slightly, making it difficult to see his face. However, Nian, standing at the bottom of the steps, had a good view of him from above. "Mr. Rogers?" Nian asked in surprise. The white man paused, then looked at the boy before him and nodded slightly. The man who had quietly emerged from the memorial was none other than the very man it commemorates, Captain America, Steve Rogers. Chapter 27: The beginning of the New York Night Dungeon. New York Park. A thin layer of transparent ice floated on the surface of the central lake, glittering in the sunlight. A young white man and a young Chinese man sat side by side on wooden benches by the lake. Captain America, Steve Rogers, glanced sideways at Nian and said teasingly, "Thank you for not shouting just now, or you might have been surrounded and watched again." "That's not what I wanted to see either. I don't like attracting too much attention either." Nian shrugged, then asked curiously, "Captain, you're still alive? Just dug out of the Arctic ice not long ago." Steve spread his hands. Perhaps because neither Steve nor Nian consider the other special, they chatted tacitly and naturally. "You just said you don't like too much attention," Steve sighed. "Back in my day, everyone wanted everyone's attention focused on them. Has this generation of young people changed?" "Times have changed, Captain." Nian wanted to rant, but instead decided, in fact, the intensity with which people seek attention now is definitely even more exaggerated than it was in your time. "I don't want to draw attention. It's simply because I prefer a peaceful and quiet daily life." Steve's young, handsome face froze for a moment at Nian's words. "Captain, I have a personal question for you," Nian asked curiously. "If you were given another chance, would you prefer to be an ordinary person or a superhero?" "This." Steve paused, as if stumped by Nian's question. After a moment, Steve said softly, "I'd like to be an ordinary person after being a hero. Unfortunately, it's too late now." He looked only in his early 20s, but now, the helplessness and desolation on his face resembled that of a centenarian. However, calling him a centenarian didn't seem out of place. Nian vaguely understood what Steve was trying to say. As a superhero, you're mostly serving the world. As an ordinary person, you're definitely serving someone. And when the world still exists, but that person is gone, many things lose their meaning. Why do you even think about that? Steve looked at Nian in confusion. "Nothing, it just suddenly occurred to me." Nian shook his head. This question would become the biggest one he would face in his future life. The choice my aunt had spoken of also stemmed from this. Extraordinary, ordinary. A single thought. Nian. Senior. Suddenly, two voices called out from behind. Nian turned to see Gwen and Kara. How had they gotten here? Kid, Steve suddenly patted Nian's shoulder, speaking meaningfully. As someone who's been through this, I want to remind you to cherish the present moment. And also, take care of yourself. Captain, you misunderstood. Nian's mouth twitched, wondering why Captain America was always so frivolous. Captain, see you someday. He waved, rising from his chair, backpack in hand, and headed over to Gwen and the others. Steve made an okay gesture. Nian, who were you talking to just now? Gwen looked at the chair in the distance curiously. Nian also looked back, and at this time, Captain America was no longer on the wooden chair by the lake. Nian said casually, we met on the road and chatted for a few minutes. Really? Gwen blinked, doubtful, but did not ask any further. Kara next to her showed a thoughtful look. Nian and his group continued to go shopping and have fun, and when they came to their senses, it was already dark. After nightfall, New York, the city that never sleeps, is more vibrant. For young boys and girls who are just beginning to fall in love, night is the best time to create miracles. Especially when traveling, they just have an excuse to take a break for a night away from home. This is the perfect time and place. In a local hotel in Queens, New York. What? There is only one room left? Nian frowned after asking at the front desk. After thinking about it, he took out his bank card and slapped it on the table. Then let's open one. Nian, this is not a good idea. Behind him, Gwen's ears were red. This was still too exciting and bold for her. Senior. Kara also shook hands awkwardly, looking like she wanted to say something but stopped. What are you thinking about? Nian scratched his head and arranged, you two will stay here tonight. I'll go to the nearby street and find another hotel to rest. The two beautiful girls were dumbfounded again by the unexpected path and ending. The hotel receptionist opened his mouth wide when he saw this scene, not knowing what to say. Please, be a human being. After settling the residence of childhood sweetheart Gwen and schoolmate Kara, Nian couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Carrying a school bag with a little orange cat's head occasionally exposed, he walked along the street outside the hotel entrance to look for a residence. Under the night sky, neon lights flickered. The busy streets were bustling with traffic. Nian joined the crowd and walked. At the same time, in a corner of the same street. In the dark alley with no lighting, damp and rotten, an unknown pool of still water on the ground suddenly squirmed on its own. The viscous black gelatinous liquid seemed to have vitality at this time. It rolled and moved quietly to the dark corner of the wall, as if lurking and spying on the pedestrians passing by on the street outside. Is there any human physique suitable for parasitism? I can't hold on any longer. The unknown creature whispered hoarsely in anxiety. It had no actual limbs or brain, just a ball of black liquid, and no one knew where the words came from. At this moment, a teenager with a school bag on his back passed by the street outside the alley. The black liquid creature suddenly moved violently, and chased Nian madly and quickly along the wall of the alley. Puff. Nian, who was walking on the street, staggered. He looked back in surprise, only to feel someone gently pushing his back. However, there was no one behind him. Is it an illusion? Nian muttered to himself. He didn't notice that a pair of cat's eyes in the school bag he was carrying were suddenly staring at a certain part of Nian's body. Very quickly, Nian found the second hotel not far from the hotel where Gwen and the others were. The hotel door was a revolving door design. Nian stepped forward and stretched out his hand to push the revolving door, but when he entered a built-in space of the revolving door, his body suddenly trembled violently. A strange feeling from the inside out filled his heart. What's going on? Nian opened his eyes wide, not knowing what was going on. He looked at his hands in surprise, only to see his body and the clothes he was wearing melting rapidly like a snowman in summer. Countless black liquids dripped down, and the sticky liquid was connected to the body with threads. Glue. In an instant, Nian melted into a pool of black liquid, and fell to the ground together with the school bag he was carrying. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28, The 3-in-1 Nian is online. Inside the revolving door separating the hotel from the street outside, A dark liquid lurched on the floor. Suffocation, oppression. An unprecedented feeling washed over Nian's body and soul. Difficulty breathing? No, it was impossible to breathe. In that instant, Nian felt unfit to survive on this planet. It was definitely the ability of the master of the familiar that had been triggered, so much so that his body, too, had been transformed by some transcendental power. If this continues, will I die? Nian cried, sprawled on the floor like a ball of boiling liquid, his entire body throbbing restlessly. Meow. A cat's meow caught Nian's attention. A small orange kitten emerged from the zipper of a fallen backpack beside him. It was Xiao Wang. Nian's entire body trembled. In that instant, as if driven by instinct, the black liquid he had transformed into leaped forward, enveloping the kitten, then quickly blending into and clinging to its tiny body. Hotel front desk. Welcome. The front desk clerk saw the revolving door being pushed open, and subconsciously looked up. What caught her eye was a black kitten. Where did this stray cat come from? The front desk clerk hurried forward to drive it away. The black kitten squatted there in a daze for a moment, and then, reacting quickly, it picked up the school bag on the ground and rushed out through the still revolving door to the street outside. On the busy street. Seeing the black kitten suddenly rushing out of the hotel, pedestrians avoided it and watched it disappear into the street corner with the school bag. After a while, on the open-air rooftop of a 5-story building, the school bag was placed aside, and the black kitten stood on the rooftop railing, staring blankly at the modern street below with flashing neon lights. Who am I? I'm a symbiote, Venom. No, I'm a devourer, a larva. No, no, no. None of this is right. The black kitten covered its head in a human-like manner, struggling for a moment before its eyes lit up with wisdom. I remember now. I'm Nian Prince, an ordinary human middle school student living in downtown Washington. What exactly happened to me? Nian took a deep breath, sensing a chaotic, yet still nagging voice in his head. A hoarse, sinister voice cried, "What's wrong with this human body? Why is he the dominant one? How abhorrent, hateful, and pathetic." A tender, innocent voice asked, "Nian, are you alright?" "Oh, I can't control my body anymore. I've been locked up in a dark room. Everyone, be quiet. Let me clear my mind." Nian rubbed his temples and squatted on the ground to clear his mind. Thanks to the shared mind information, Nian quickly understood what had happened to his body. It all started with a voice in his head, the symbiotic life form named Venom. Venom originated from a planet in outer space and unexpectedly arrived on Earth aboard a spacecraft belonging to New York Biological Research Company. As symbiotes, they are physiologically and mechanically unable to survive on their own and can only parasitize other organisms. Venom, the symbiote, discovered that some human physiques were well suited for symbiosis. After a thorough search, it ultimately chose Nian as its host. Then, a more complex situation arose. Symbiotes are genderless, yet in some ways, they can be considered both male and female. When the symbiote parasitized Nian, it naturally created the potential for intimate contact. Furthermore, when Liquid and Nian symbiotically merged, their internal fluids were shared and exchanged. Thus, Nian's ability, the Master of Dependence, was activated. Nian acquired the characteristics and abilities of Venom, the symbiote, leading to the scene of his body melting into black liquid. What happened next was simple. Driven by parasitic instincts, Nian parasitized the little orange cat, Xiao Wang, and coexisted with him. Simply put, Venom parasitized Nian, who in turn parasitized Xiao Wang. Symbiotes, humans, and elemental devourers, 3 distinct species, accidentally merged into one. While Nian was the dominant force, Venom and Xiao Wang's thoughts could be shared and communicated. Humans, surprisingly, possess such extraordinary abilities. The symbiont, Venom, sharing their thoughts, understood the situation and asked, puzzled, "Since you've become a symbiote, why can I still parasitize you? Symbiotes can only fight and devour each other, they cannot coexist." "I roughly understand what's going on," Nian sighed. He had indeed acquired the symbiote's abilities and characteristics, but he remained essentially human. This resulted in the current situation, the symbiote parasitizing Nian, and Nian parasitizing elemental devourers. "This is the first time I've encountered 3 creatures coexisting together," Venom's raspy, sharp voice echoed in Nian's mind. Suddenly, it said excitedly, "Wait, even though I can't control it, I can feel that this body we've formed through parasitic coexistence is incredibly powerful. Powerful? I guess so. Nian's mouth twitched. He glanced at his pudding-sized cat paw, unsure how to describe his current physical condition. His body seemed enveloped in a dark coat, his lower abdomen streaked with white markings like lightning. That's right, that's right. Venom said excitedly. This way, we can defeat those guys. Nian's head tilted, and through shared thoughts, he quickly understood what the symbiote Venom had said. Venom wasn't the only symbiote that had descended on Earth. There were 3 more. These 3 symbiotes were hostile to Venom, and their strong colonial consciousness seemed to be intent on controlling humanity and leading other tribes to invade Earth. Destroying the Earth again? When will it ever stop? The people of Earth are eating your rice, right? Nian rolled his eyes, muttering indignantly. But suddenly, the black kitten trembled slightly, then turned and looked behind him, as if sensing something. On the other side of the building, a model girl climbed up the wall, more than 10 meters tall. Like a puppet, her movements were stiff, her eyes glassy, and her bare hands were covered in brown barbs. She's one of my kind. We're symbiotic, and we can sense each other's location. Venom shouted a warning in Nian's mind. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Nian moved his limbs, transforming into a flash of black lightning and fleeing. Seeing this, the model girl immediately pursued him at inhuman speed, the brown barbs on her arms growing rapidly, like 2 giant, ferocious hammers, slamming down on the tiny cat's body. In midair. Giving you face, huh? The black kitten suddenly turned around, its mouth widening in a devilish grin. It swung its small tail back, the air instantly cleaving with a sharp edge. The tail transformed into a 4-meter-long sword, more than 10 times larger than the cat's body. Swish! The 2 heavy hammer's limbs were neatly sliced in half. The symbiote parasitizing the model girl was shocked, never having imagined that the venom of the Earth kitten's waste could be so powerful. She was about to retreat when the pitch-black, cold, 4-meter-long sword slashed down, severing the girl in half from head to toe. Chapter 29, The Terrifying Trinity. Washington. Late at night, the daylight still on in the house. Diana, dressed in a beige dress, sat on the living room sofa, her long, slender, white legs folded together. She leaned against the lamp, reading a book on archaeology and law. Her intellectual and noble aura seemed to settle into a halo, illuminating the surroundings. Yet, even as she concentrated on her reading, Diana would occasionally glance toward the door. She knew Nian would stay in New York tonight and wouldn't be back. Yet, she would subconsciously, repeatedly, engage in this behavior that even Diana herself found baffling. Was it habit? Used to Nian coming home every day, excitedly calling her auntie, circling around her, recounting both happy and sad stories. Used to the warmth and ordinary life of 16 years. Used to Nian's presence. Am I feeling lonely? Diana wondered, lost in thought as she stared at the quiet, deserted living room. Even before meeting the child, she had lived alone in the human world for decades. She'd walked through such a long time, so why, in less than a day, had she felt unbearably lonely? Yes, loneliness. A goddess descended from the bloodline of ancient Greek gods, it seemed as if she hadn't experienced this feeling deeply. After all, solitude was the destiny of eternal existence. But loneliness, apparently, has different levels. Diana placed her book back on the shelf and walked gracefully towards her room. It was Nian's room. The built-in light was unlit, and in the quiet darkness, Diana sat by the bed and slowly laid down. Her slightly curly hair bloomed beautifully like petals on the bed. Diana's slender hands gently wrapped around the duvet, embracing the boy's familiar scent. Beneath her elegant white gauze dress, her ivory legs tightened slightly, then relaxed completely. What are you doing now, child? Diana's face flushed slightly. She closed her eyes naturally, drifting off to sleep on Nian's bed. New York, Queens. Venom, I didn't say I was going to kill her. Nian, the 3-in-1 Venom cat, opened his eyes wide and briefly hovered in the air above the rooftop, watching the model before him being cleaved in half by the long sword his tail had transformed into. This wasn't like the previous one, where he had only acquired his aunt's or the Devourer's abilities. In this unique situation of parasitism, Nian possessed both the racial abilities of Venom and Devourer, internally controlling the symbiote Venom while externally manipulating the Devourer's host body. Mastering his current body became far more challenging. Fortunately, Nian wasn't the only one fumbling around this time. Venom and Devourer's consciousness acted like secondary systems to the main host, providing appropriate reminders of Nian's racial abilities and suggesting the best course of action. This was a true 3-in-1 model. This was why Nian was able to react so accurately and skillfully utilize the symbiote's transformation ability, transforming his tail into an armed longsword. However, the first strike was Nian's own decision, while the second was guided by Venom. "It won't die so easily," Venom's voice echoed in Nian's mind. Following its words, reflected in Nian's cat-like eyes, the model girl's body, which had been cleaved in two, and even the wrists that were severed first, were completely bloodless. Instead of blood splattering, strands of a viscous brown liquid gushed out. The brown liquid gushed out from the cuts on the model girl's body, coalescing and rapidly pulling the four halves of the model's body together. In about 2 seconds, the model girl had recovered completely, falling to the ground unharmed. Venom's raspy voice chimed in, "This human woman is beyond saving. Judging from her current appearance and behavior, it's clear the symbiote within her is completely dominant. In this state, her brain and body have long been destroyed, leaving her in a state of near vegetative state, retaining only the last vestiges of life, unable to voluntarily resist. And the injuries she sustained earlier are also sustained by the symbiote within her. If the symbiote dies or leaves her body, she will die immediately." "Really? That way? There's nothing to worry about." Nian suddenly grinned fiercely, his small mouth widening to a curve that took up half his cat-like face. His bloody maw was filled with razor-sharp fangs. The previously adorable black kitten had transformed into a tiny demon from hell. The symbiote's ruthless brutality and the Devourer's ferocious savagery were constantly straining human rationality, causing even Nian, the dominant force within the triad, to behave in an unimaginably monstrous manner. The symbiote within the model girl knew there was no chance of escape, and a layer of tough, brown, barbed skin immediately emerged from its entire body. Almost immediately, as it formed its symbiote's protective coat, the black kitten in front of it moved. The model girl's vision flashed, and before she could react, she glanced down. Her chest was so hollow that she could see directly behind her. What just happened? The symbiote within the model girl was stunned. The tough symbiote's protective coat, the flesh, bones, and even her internal organs were all pierced in an instant. So fast. It was impossible to see clearly. No, astonishing speed alone wouldn't have been enough. The model girl clutched the gaping hole in her chest as the symbiote within her surged, repairing her body. "It's no use, it won't die like this. Symbiotes have a near-infinite ability to repair themselves." Venom cried hoarsely. The black kitten behind the model girl ignored him, continuing its lightning-fast charge forward, its tiny body the warhead of a supersonic missile. Bang! The model girl, also possessed by the symbiote, had another dark, hollow cavity etched into her underbelly, still not fully repaired. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The black kitten's rapid back-and-forth movement was like lightning, leaving deep scratches on the rooftop and a dense, dented pattern of claw marks on the surrounding walls. As if lashed out by a storm 1,000 times greater, the model girl, standing in the middle, was unable to move. Her body was constantly being ravaged and torn apart, the symbiote's repair speed far outstripping the damage. Why? The symbiote within the model girl cried in horror. That damn venom. What kind of monster is it that's infested? Why is there such a huge disparity in strength? It couldn't hold back any longer. Brown liquid gushed out of the girl's mouth, swiftly rushing towards the crowded street below the rooftop. Stop it. It wants to infest another human. Venom screamed sharply. You're overthinking it. The black kitten waved its hand indifferently. Its armed claws, larger than its own body, shot forward like tentacles, grabbing the brown liquid still hovering above the street. You can't kill me. The symbiote, shaped like brown liquid, seethed with fury and struggled frantically. Oh. The black kitten gave a sinister smile. It snatched the symbiote close to its body and flung it directly into its gaping maw. As soon as Nian's mouth closed, without even a swallowing motion, the symbiote vanished from this world. It wasn't eaten, as it seemed. Rather, it was banished to the alternate dimension of the Devourer. Without a host there, the seemingly invincible symbiote would soon lose its life. Quick victory. In this state, let's clear out the rest. Nian whispered in a sinister, hoarse voice, looking down coldly at the nighttime New York. As the three entities coexisted, his behavior gradually became more like that of the Venom symbiote and the Metamorph. Human rationality was warping and collapsing. But precisely because of this, the power of the Trinity began to fully emerge. Chapter 30 Black Flash, Green Hulk. In New York City, a prime location where every inch of land is valuable, lies the recently completed headquarters building of Stark Industries. Its futuristic, upward spinning form, a rooftop viewing platform large enough for fighter jets to land, and the distinctive Stark logo, even amidst the teeming skyscrapers of New York City, stands out with distinction. At that moment, on the top floor of Stark headquarters, in the luxurious lobby built into the viewing platform, house it here. A gentleman in a sharp black suit swirled his red wine glass, his hands proudly and unabashedly raised. A faint blue glow emanated from the center of his chest, spilling through his shirt, as if embracing half the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Behind him, a man dressed in a gray long shirt, overalls, and Doc Martens boots, his hair unkempt and disheveled, a stark contrast to the elegant surroundings, stepped forward. How should I put it? The scruffy man pushed his glasses up his nose, pondered for a moment, and commented, "That's certainly your style and characteristics." Stark smiled and said, "This will also be the headquarters of our alliance in the future." "That's great. This will elevate our alliance, which hasn't even existed yet, to several levels." The scruffy man shrugged. "I don't have any money, so the most I can do is help." "More than just strength?" Stark shook his head slightly, looking at him sincerely, and said, "Banner, I also need your wisdom and knowledge. With your help, I believe many of my technological ideas and concepts will be realized in the future." The scruffy man named Banner remained non-committal. Despite Stark's exaggerated praise, even in the industry, his expression remained surprisingly calm. Because, in the field of science and technology, he truly had the talent. Banner. Full name, Robert Bruce Banner. A world-renowned physicist with 7 doctorates, if he hadn't been in hiding in recent years, he would have been a scientist frequently featured in the newspapers. He also has another unknown identity, the biggest reason he's been hiding from the world for the past few years, the Hulk. The abomination that recently appeared in Washington was indirectly caused by him. Banner. Stark was about to say something, when a beeping alarm sounded from somewhere on the top floor. "Jarvis, what's going on?" Stark asked, frowning slightly. Suddenly, from above a table in the luxurious lobby, hundreds of beams of light intertwined in the air, quickly forming a 3-dimensional virtual projection. The artificial intelligence responded in a gentle, concise male voice, "Sir, just now, a special incident involving the supernatural realm occurred in Queens. This is the live footage." Banner, upon hearing this, looked at the virtual projection curiously. Ah! The muscle car rammed through several vehicles blocking its path, then, as if in a panic, continued to accelerate and drive the wrong way, plunging onto the opposite main road. Just as the muscle car was about to crash into the parked cars, the next scene made Stark and Banner's pupils shrink violently. The speeding muscle car suddenly stopped, a shadow flashing by like a black mist. The next moment, the front of the car suddenly and strangely dented inward, and then the entire body exploded in two, as if torn apart by some terrifying force. Then, an even more terrifying scene unfolded. From the explosively disintegrating muscle car, several fragments of a human man's body fell out, flung in different directions across the streets of the intersection. 2 of the torsos just happened to be buried in the stunned crowd standing on the pedestrian street. Terror and bloodshed descended. "Ow! What jumped out?" "Go!" Screams rang out again, and a black shadow flashed across the intersection, chasing down one of the streets. The virtual projection ended here. What just happened? Stark looked at Banner in shock. Banner shook his head, indicating he hadn't seen anything clearly either. "Jarvis, rewind the footage," Stark thoughtfully instructed. "Yes, sir." Under the guidance of the artificial intelligence, the virtual projection rewound the previously played footage until the moment just before the muscle car was destroyed. "That's right. Zoom in on the front of the car and play it in slow motion," Stark said gravely. The footage began to play. Under the slow zoom lens, a small, black, animal-like figure could be clearly seen as it passed through the group of parked cars and slammed into the front of the muscle car like a cannonball. "Play frame by frame," Stark said. The entire image seemed frozen. Mysterious things that were invisible at normal playback speed were now revealed. Banner's eyes widened in shock. The black figure was actually a cat. Yes, hairless, like a kitten covered in a sleek, leathery black coat. The moment the kitten violently slammed into the muscle car, the car, already speeding forward, halted its forward momentum. Then, the black kitten's body suddenly expanded several times, its limbs bulging with immense, resilient muscles and tendons. Its ferocious front paws violently ripped the car's hull apart. This was the source of the car's explosion. The moment it tore through the car, the bizarre and terrifying black monster transformed back into its previous kitten form and pursued one of the remaining pieces at breakneck speed. What kind of creature is that? Stark's expression grew graver. Even more startling was the fact that Dr. Banner, standing next to him, suddenly turned pale and twitched slightly, breathing with difficulty. Jarvis. Stark instinctively took a few steps back and stepped into a corner of the luxurious lobby. The artificial intelligence, Jarvis, quickly understood its master's intention. A metal lift rose from the floor beneath Stark's feet. A series of mechanical arms and components moved, and one golden red metal shell after another was attached to his body. Within 5 seconds, it was a matter of seconds. Stark was completely armored, clad in a steel tunic. The energy channels on his chest and his metal eye sockets glowed white like an iron god. "Calm down, Banner." Stark, transformed into Iron Man, raised his hand to comfort the pale-faced Banner. "I am fine." Banner clenched his fists, breathing rapidly to calm his agitated state. His face flickered between blue and white. Finally, Banner leaned against the table in frustration, the bulging veins in his neck completely fading. Seeing this, Stark breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Stay here and don't move. I'll handle things outside." "Wait, Tony." Banner, somewhat exhausted, leaned on his chair and called to Stark. He pointed at the dark shadow on the virtual screen and said anxiously, "That monster is very dangerous. Seeing it is like pulling the trigger of a pistol into my mouth. My body instinctively wants to turn into the Hulk." Chapter 31, Hunting Symbiote, Spider-Man. On a pedestrian street bathed in neon lights, a decaying human remains fell to the tiled floor, sending onlookers shrieking and fleeing in all directions. A flash of black passed by, and Nian landed deftly beside the remains. His vertical pupils burned with a bluish-white flame, and his dark-skinned body radiated the muscularity of an assembly line. Venom rasped in his mind, it's already parasitized another human nearby. Clearly, it's far more powerful than the first symbiote, capable of choosing almost any human as its host. Which human? The black kitten, like the most formidable hunter, scanned the fleeing passers-by with its cold, cat-like eyes. None of them showed any obvious signs of being possessed by the symbiote. He quickly realized that the second symbiote was attempting to take advantage of the chaos. "Where is the symbiote?" Nian demanded, his mouth wide open, irritably grinning. The instincts and bestiality of the symbiote and the devourer raged wildly, dragging human rationality to the brink of collapse. Violence, savagery, apathy, and other inhuman evils invaded his body and mind, causing Nian's behavior to become even more unbridled and insane. Just like just now, Nian tore apart and strangled the human host that the symbiote was parasitizing. Although he knew that the human was beyond saving and that further delay would kill more innocent people on the road, his action was indeed the best solution at the time. However, this bloodthirsty and brutal act, carried out without hesitation, was a far cry from his normal human thinking. Venom said, "I can only sense within 30 meters, but there are so many humans nearby, over 100. I can't pinpoint which one has been infected." Its voice grew even hoarser and sharper, offering advice like a demonic whisper. "I think the best solution right now is to kill every human on the scene. Otherwise, if they escape, even more people will die. Don't hesitate. Make a choice now, they'll blend into the crowd and escape." "Shut up." Nian growled hoarsely, gazing at the fleeing humans before suddenly shoving a claw into the ground below. With a shudder, the entire pedestrian street shook violently. Centered around Nian, who resembled a black kitten, dozens of terrifying cracks spread across the flat surface. Then, with a 30-meter range as the dividing line, hard tentacles fashioned from black slime burst forth from the ground, piercing straight up towards the city sky 10 meters above. Dozens of these hard tentacles formed a dense barbed barrier, trapping everyone within a 30-meter radius. Deathly silence. A dead silence gripped the scene. Countless people looked up in shock, overcome by immense fear. They also recalled the humiliation of being imprisoned in a birdcage. Ahem, wrong set. Find it. Nian planted one claw in the ground, motionless, while the other transformed into a tentacle and reached out to the crowd. "Monster, don't come any closer." Many screamed and fell to the ground. But they soon discovered that the tentacles reaching out were soft, as if covered with ordinary cat paw pads. They merely touched shoulders or chests, then quickly spun away, touching each person surrounded by the tentacle railings one by one. Nian was searching through the tentacles, searching for the second human host of the symbiote. After all, symbiotes can infect silently, and when there's no conscious control, often even the host is unaware of their presence. When Nian had checked more than half the people, a middle-aged man standing in the back of the crowd frowned slightly and touched his chest for an inexplicable reason. For some reason, beads of cold sweat began to form on his body, soaking his lining and making it feel chilly. Clearly, his fear had largely subsided after he realized the tentacles wouldn't harm anyone. Terrified. The second symbiote, lurking within the middle-aged man, knew through his shared perspective that Venom's host was about to locate it, and shuddered involuntarily. Before this, it couldn't sense the first symbiote, knowing it had been killed. After being discovered by Nian, it constantly switched hosts in its escape, and as it did so, it became increasingly aware of Venom's host's power. The difference was immense. On their own, these symbiotes struggled to even achieve the most humble survival. But upon attaching themselves to the right creature, they could unleash a host of abilities, including hardening and transformation, super strength, and super speed. These abilities were closely tied to the host's constitution. But after rotating through so many human hosts, the second symbiote discovered that its power was far inferior to that of its venom host. How could it have known? Nian's current state wasn't simply the result of Venom's parasitic abilities. It was a combination of Venom's own parasitism and the symbiotic nature of its own inhabiting the metamorph. The combined effect was far more than just 1+1. "Symbiote Master, you can't come save me. I'm dying. I'm dying here." The second symbiote fluttered within the middle-aged man's body. Nian's tentacles had already reached a short distance ahead of him, on the verge of reaching its current host. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Death was approaching. The second symbiote felt despair, but then it seemed to sense something. The middle-aged man turned his head, baffled, to look at two people in the crowd. They were a woman in her early 30s, holding a boy around 10. Though terrified, the woman whispered to the child, "Peter, it's okay, don't worry. Aunt May is here to protect you." Peter nodded, looking at the terrifying black kitten with some fear, then mustered up the courage to stand in front of Aunt May's body. Suddenly, his hair stood on end, and his sidelong glance met the middle-aged man's blank gaze. As if stared into by an evil abyss, Peter's face turned pale with fear. Instinctively, he pointed a finger and blurted out, "The monster the black kitten is looking for, is him." "Peter, what are you talking about?" Aunt May was stunned. "What are you talking about? I'm not a monster." The middle-aged man, also finding this somewhat unbelievable, protested, but suddenly, his eyes widened in horror as a glob of gray-green, viscous liquid gushed out of his open mouth. Half of the liquid remained inside him, while the other half hovered in the air, wriggling with the appearance of life. The bizarre scene, so utterly shattering, stunned everyone around him, leaving them frozen in place. "Found you." The 3-in-1 Nian was relentless in his killing spree. The moment the second symbiote was exposed, his extended tentacles instantly transformed into spikes, hardening and darting forward to kill. Piercing through the air, the tentacles pierced the gray-green symbiote's body like a nail, pinning it to the tentacle railing behind it. Zzzz. The second symbiote surged and seethed violently, abruptly separating the pinned portion. The remaining liquid body, like a water gun, like a gray-green net, rushed towards the woman nearby. "Aunt May, be careful." Peter stretched out his hands in front of Aunt May, allowing the gray-green liquid to penetrate his body with incredible ease. Chapter 32, Poisonous Spider, Tyranny. Ah! A boy is the new host. Seeing the second symbiote's desperate decision, the 3-in-1 Nian felt a flicker of surprise, but that didn't stop his decisive and cold attack. Pop! Sharp, hard and dark tentacles pierced the air, piercing Peter, the boy possessed by the second symbiote. At that moment, Venom's voice echoed in his mind, "Something's not right. I can vaguely sense that the human child's physique is different from that of ordinary humans." As if in line with the symbiote Venom's words, just before the tentacle was about to strike, The boy's small hand shot up with lightning speed and grasped the high-speed sniping tentacle firmly. The tip of the dark, hardened tentacle abruptly stopped, about a centimeter in front of Peter's chest. "Hey!" A hoarse, shrill voice echoed, and the boy grasping the tentacle let out an inhuman grin. A viscous, gray-green liquid began to seep out of his entire body. This viscous fluid rapidly expanded, twisted, deformed, and hardened, forming a more complete and resilient gray-green reproductive tissue and cortex. The entire scene looked like Peter's adult body, deformed and distorted, reduced to a nearly 2-meter-tall gray-green alien monster. The gray-green color, the height, and the sense of strength evident from the muscular build alone, briefly reminded Nian of the abomination. However, the abomination's appearance was significantly different. The second symbiote parasitizing the boy now possessed a torso with a sleek, yet not bloated, body. His arms and legs had a sturdy, slender feel. Especially noticeable were the pale, venomous spider markings on his chest and back. I never thought a human could have such a formidable physique. Looking down at the gray-green hand that gripped it, the venomous spider grinned fiercely, its mouth wide open, its long, scarlet tongue spitting out. A puff of heat emanated from its powerful, deformed form. After parasitizing the human child Peter, its symbiote abilities were fully realized for the first time. It felt more powerful than ever before, and it proved to be so. Venom Spider, with just one try, easily withstood the Venom host's tentacle attack. It was a terrifying attack that it had previously been unable to withstand on its own. This only made it feel secure. It's done again. With this body as a host, I'm the true boss of the symbiotes. Venom Spider licked its sharp, ugly fangs with immense excitement. Peter, a woman's miserable, trembling voice echoed from the side. You're not Peter. Aunt May stared at Venom Spider nearby, suppressing her fear and not retreating. She whimpered, "Monster, give Peter back to me." "Haha. I'll kill you first, then I'll finish off Venom and his host." Venom Spider sneered fiercely, raising its gray-green palm and slamming it down on the woman's sobbing face. At that moment, a hoarse, cold voice suddenly echoed from the front, "Have you caught enough?" "Huh?" The venomous spider hadn't yet completely closed its grip when it was startled to find the tentacle it had been holding suddenly clasped back against its own. Hand in hand, but not in a friendly, beautiful way. In that instant, the venomous spider felt an indescribable, terrifying force, transmitted unmistakably from the dark tentacles, forcibly pulling its entire, fortified body toward it. Nian's extended tentacle yanked the venomous spider upward, and when it was nearly 30 meters in the air, it slammed down hard into the ground below. Bang! The earth trembled and screamed. The venomous spider smashed into the ground, sending debris flying and creating a several-meter-deep crater in the street. Damn it! The venomous spider, covered in dirt, roared angrily as it leaped from the crater. With a flick of its wrist, it shot out 2 streams of gray-green sticky silk, which latched onto the tentacle railing behind Nian. With a fierce tug on the silk, the venomous spider slid through the air at breakneck speed, fiercely kicking Nian. The black kitten remained motionless, one hand still embedded in the ground, forming a railing of tentacle. Suddenly, its tail twitched forward with a sharp jerk. The air crackled. With a snap, the venomous spider flew away like a fly. How is this possible? Its body made close contact with the ground again, leaving the venomous spider completely stunned. Why? Even though it had become many times stronger, its strength, speed, shape-shifting, and other superpowers still couldn't match the venom host. In other words, in its symbiotic form, possessing the human boy's current spider-like abilities, the second symbiote could only truly appreciate the terrifying power of the 3-in-1 Nian. Who was the real monster? The venomous spider leaped with incredible speed, its silk shooting towards the distant skyscraper. Seeing it couldn't defeat Nian, it tried to stick to its strategy, escape. But the dark tentacles were even faster. Its tentacles quickly wrapped around the spider's legs. Nian, increasingly impatient and furious, dragged it between the night sky and the earth, flinging and slamming it again and again. Bang! 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 He threw the spider countless times. Only then did Nian calm himself down a bit and release his tentacles. In front of it, the ground was already pockmarked with holes. Dust settled. Lying in one of the holes, the spider lay sprawled on the ground, its armored body largely melted, like a wrecked car splattered with the green oil, unable to maintain a fully armed fighting stance. The scene could only be described in one word: horrific. Is there any hope for its host? Nian asked coldly, managing to maintain a modicum of rationality. Venom's demonic whisper echoed, "It's hard to say. The boy's physique is indeed unique, but he's so young. We'll have to see if he can regain control of his own body." It gave a sinister smile. "My advice is, don't delay. Just wipe out the host along with him." Nian remained silent as its tentacles transformed into a massive sickle, hovering above the venomous spider's head. Human rationality was dwindling, and the 3-in-1 he had become increasingly bloodthirsty and cold-blooded. Chapter 33 Iron Man vs. Trinity. The invincible and terrifying kitten, like the embodiment of the Grim Reaper, held its black scythe over the venomous spider's head. Nian's previous battle with the first symbiote had clearly demonstrated this point. Even though a symbiote can rapidly repair its host's injuries, there are limits to its ability. If the damage sustained by its host in a short period of time far exceeds its ability to repair, the symbiote can no longer sustain its host's life and is forced to leave. However, this would obviously also result in the death of the host. "Please, don't kill him." Aunt May scrambled to the front of the venomous spider, arms outstretched, shielding the black scythe with her frail body. At this moment, Nian, his rationality collapsing, could no longer listen to her words, only resolutely carrying out what he believed was right. Even if everything he was doing now seemed like the actions of a villain. At the critical moment, boom! 2 laser beams pierced one side of the tentacle railing, blasting it apart. Under the gaze of the astonished people trapped within, a figure clad in a golden-red steel armor descended from the sky. Clang! His left knee and right fist struck the ground simultaneously, a dull metallic sound. Like a man-made iron god, he stood up, his raised palm catching the engine port, a dazzling white light gathering in the air that stunned the crowd. "You guys are really lively here tonight," Iron Man quipped cheerfully, ignoring the atmosphere. "It's Iron Man. Iron Man is here, we're saved." Great! He instantly dispelled the fear and despair that enveloped the scene, becoming the anchor of support for the trapped people. Perhaps only Iron Man could achieve this in New York City. "This isn't a live fan reception," Iron Man continued, teasing. "Ladies and gentlemen, could you please leave?" At his words, the crowd reacted immediately, leaving through the broken tentacle barrier behind Iron Man. From his appearance until now, Iron Man had acted effortlessly, as if he had a firm grasp of the situation. However, no one knew what was happening. Inside his Iron Man suit, Stark's face was grim and tense. He stared intently at the seemingly harmless black kitten on the field and whispered, "Jarvis, can you determine what kind of creature it is?" "I'm sorry, sir. The database currently holds no information. Scans can't detect its internal structure. We can only tentatively determine it's an alien organism." 2 unknown alien creatures, battling each other. Stark, holding his hands in a defensive position, glanced at the venomous spider lying behind the woman. The traces at the scene made his judgment easy. At that moment, the black kitten's claws, which had been stuck in the ground, moved. Iron Man was startled, mistakenly believing the creature intended to kill the evacuating civilians. He unleashed a laser beam. The bright laser, as bright as daylight, illuminated the street and, in the blink of an eye, struck the black kitten's head. Boom! Searing energy and fire washed over the tiny body. Nian withdrew his claws from the ground. Now that the symbiote had been found, the tentacle railings were no longer necessary. Iron Man, however, had wordlessly fired a cannon at its forehead, which had him a bit mad. If Nian were normal, he might have dismissed it as a misunderstanding. But now, Nian was 3-in-1. He was a Nian whose human rationality had almost vanished. He was a Nian who was violent, bloodthirsty, savage, extreme, and prone to evil. And so, as destructive laser energy rippled across his dark form, Nian, in the form of a black kitten, transformed into a streak of black light, breaking the sound barrier and slamming into Iron Man's groin. Bang! Iron Man felt like he was being hit at full speed by a miniature truck. The AI, Jarvis, immediately issued a component damage warning. His iron body, bearing the immense impact, slammed into the outer wall of a tall building behind him. Fire! Stark growled, angered, as the Iron Man suit sunk deep into the wall. Immediately, the strategic weapons system hidden in the Iron Man's shoulders activated, and 4 micro-missiles, trailing flames, shot towards the black kitten. Nian froze in midair, watching the incoming micro-missiles. Suddenly, he violently opened his mouth to 3 or 4 times its size, like a bloody maw, and bit down on the oncoming micro-missiles. He held them in his mouth like candy. The micro-missiles detonated within his mouth, causing Nian's face to puff up a few times before quickly relaxing again. He burped, exhaling several wisps of smoke thick with the smell of gunpowder. Stark's face was filled with disbelief. He finally understood why Dr. Banner had suddenly decided to transform into the Hulk. This cat, a truly unnatural, unscientific monster. Stark gritted his teeth, and soared, relying on the Iron Man's engines. He unleashed missiles and engine lasers at full power. The moment was like the most dazzling display of fireworks. Hovering dozens of meters in the air, Iron Man transformed into a humanoid turret, every part of his body aglow. With the AI instantly executing its commands, a dense swarm of micro-missiles and laser beams crisscrossed, enveloping Nian below. Nian grinned like a demon. His black, hardened claws and tail, transformed into slender tentacles, slapped at high speed and continuously. He swatted the small missiles like mosquitoes. Boom boom boom. The targeted explosions of missiles and lasers shattered the air, sending a terrifying shockwave sweeping through the streets, shattering the windows on both sides of the street. Suddenly, one of the small missiles veered off course and blasted towards Aunt May, who was still at the scene. Oh no. Iron Man saw this, but it was too late to stop it. Aunt May's eyes widened in horror. Just as the small missile was about to fall on her, the collapsed venomous spider suddenly turned over. Venomous spider pinned Aunt May to the ground, its deformed gray-green body acting as a human shield, blocking the blast of the small missile. Amidst the raging flames, venomous spider's head, half of the liquid armor melted, revealing a corner of Peter's tender, immature face. A tear, one could call human, dripped down Aunt May's cheek. This is at the epicenter of a blast powerful enough to reduce an entire building to rubble. Nian, clad in a black shell, remained unharmed, even observing the venom spider below. Venom cried out in mild surprise, "That human boy has managed to regain some control. But it's probably only temporary. Soon, the symbiote within him will completely take over." "You mean, he can still be saved?" Nian's eyes regained a hint of clarity, his frayed rationality reconnecting. Venom replied, "Now, as long as we can separate him from the symbiote, he can survive." "I see." Nian glanced at the venom spider below, then at Iron Man above. A sudden flash of inspiration struck him. His two claws suddenly extended and shot out, wrapping around Iron Man's arms and legs. Iron Man's mind was already churning with questions when he was suddenly yanked downwards, his body disappearing into a pitch-black hole. Nian closed his mouth and landed gracefully on the ground. The streets were thick with smoke, and Iron Man had completely vanished from view. This was the best proposal from the devourer he was parasitizing. Chapter 34, Dealing with the Symbiote. Silence. Deathly silence. On the streets of Queens, watching the 3-in-1 Nian fall to the ground alone, many passers-by filming on their phones or broadcasting the scene online stood frozen in place, their mouths wide open in horror. A chill far colder than the current winter frost and snow surged down their spines and hearts. Iron Man Tony Stark, the superhero who had become New York's undisputed leader within a year and a half of his debut, terrorizing the world with his revolutionary technology. Now, devoured by an unknown monster? It was like witnessing the slaying of an almighty god, a feeling of shattered faith. Tonight was destined to be a night of despair for countless people in New York City. Nian, the culprit on the scene, didn't think too much of it. He simply felt that Iron Man's interference was too troublesome, significantly hindering the hunt for the symbiote, so he simply banned him. Falling back to the ground, Nian took a step and moved behind Venom Spider, who was protecting Aunt May with his body. Though its body, barely larger than an adult's palm, appeared harmless and somewhat adorable, the venomous spider, now dominated by Peter's consciousness, understood perfectly well the terrifying and insurmountable existence of this unknown creature in the form of a black kitten. Sensing Nian's approach, the venomous spider braced its gray-green hands against the ground, its knees also pressed against the ground. Its face, revealing only a glimpse of Peter's inner features, contorted as it spoke in broken, painful tones, "Kill me. Please, kill me. I can't control myself anymore." As it spoke, the viscous gray-green liquid on its body began to wriggle, like a corrupted, evil sludge, slowly encroaching upon the boy's exposed face. "No, Peter." Aunt May, tears streaming down her face, reached out to peel the gray-green liquid from the venomous spider's face, But to no avail. Peter was about to be engulfed again by the symbiote's reproductive armor. The 3-in-1 Nian nodded indifferently and raised his cat paw. Then, as you wish. Cluck. Bones crackled as Nian's enlarged claws extended from behind, clamping each of the venomous spider's hands and hoisting its body upward. His dark tail, like a tentacle, stretched forward to bind the spider's legs. He ignored Aunt May's cries. The black kitten's mouth widened dramatically, extending far beyond its features into a bloody maw with tangled fangs. Venom chuckled in his mind, should have done this long ago. Just devour it. Nian ignored its words and said, inexplicably, bear with me for a moment. Venom, inhabiting Nian's body, froze, a sudden sense of foreboding. Wait, what are you trying to do? Nian didn't swallow the venomous spider into his dimension. Instead, he took a deep breath, so strong that his chest expanded like a balloon. In a moment, his body had expanded 5 or 6 times its original size. Venom read Nian's thoughts and roared, you're crazy. Stop right now. Nian ignored him, certainly not stopping. He raised the venomous spider high above his head, preparing his stance, and then lifted his jaws. He aimed his jaws at the spider and suddenly opened them. The next second, people within a 5-mile radius instinctively covered their ears. Countless glass windows, car windows, and light bulbs exploded. Ah! A terrifying, high-pitched roar erupted from his mouth. Nian roared heavenward like an ancient monster, his voice cascading like a tidal wave, rumbling and exploding in the nearby air. The sound waves morphed into actual sound waves, carrying an indescribable impact. If they hadn't spread toward the night sky, the very earth would have been torn apart. He roared outwards, releasing ultrasonic waves. This terrifying and powerful scene conjured up a vision in many people's minds. It was Superman, the mortal god far away in the metropolis. Zzzz. Venom Spider endured the ultrasonic waves blast, its tough outer layer instantly shattering like boiling water in a cauldron. With a swish, strands of gray-green slime peeled off the spider's body. Under the ultrasonic waves attack, the second symbiote began to separate from its host, Peter. Of course, the second symbiote wasn't the only one suffering from the ultrasonic wave. What are you doing? Stop it. This will also break the symbiotic state. Venom wailed in agony, never expecting Nian to resort to such a self-defeating tactic. With only one symbiote parasitizing a human, roaring alone wouldn't be enough to generate ultrasonic waves. Only with the combined power of the Devourer could this be achieved. Wait? What's going on? Venom, beginning to disintegrate, quickly realized that the ultrasonic wave had no effect on Nian's main body. With his rationality returning, Nian smiled and replied truthfully through his mind, I've only gained your abilities, not your corresponding weaknesses. So you've already noticed, Venom suddenly realized. From the very beginning, Nian hadn't intended to deal with just the second symbiote, he'd planned to take it into account as well. Nian, you bastard. Before Venom could finish his words, his liquefied body was forced to separate from Nian, leaving the symbiotic relationship. However, since Nian was parasitizing the Devourer, Venom was also directly trapped within the Devourer's body. Since two symbiotes cannot coexist in the same host, and with Nian's immense strength and no ultrasonic vulnerability, Venom had no power to seize the host's authority, forcing him to enter a dormant state within the Devourer. Separated from the 3-in-1 state, Nian remained the sole symbiote, maintaining his ability and nature, parasitizing the Devourer. The evil and negative thoughts that had been affecting him vanished from his mind. Only the Devourer's meows echoed. Nian breathed a sigh of relief, having regained all his human sanity. Thinking back to his previous state still gave him a tingle of fear. The power of the 3-in-1 state was truly unimaginably powerful. But in that state, thoughts and actions would become increasingly extreme and evil, until he became a monster obsessed with killing. Venom, the symbiote, appeared cooperative, but in reality, it was guiding him down the path of rationality, seeking to seize control of this body. Venom, the symbiote, had fallen into a state of hibernation. Nian, parasitizing the Devourer, still resembled a black kitten, though the white markings on his underbelly were gone. The cold, sinister aura had vanished, leaving him more like an ordinary kitten. Nian looked up at the second symbiote that had separated from Peter. Without hesitation, he opened his mouth again, this time transforming into a bottomless black hole, swallowing the second symbiote as it tried to escape. Devourer, Banish. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35: The End of the Night. In an unknown and mysterious space, darkness reigned supreme, stretching endlessly from top to bottom. It was like a corner of outer space, devoid of starlight. Iron Man soared through this space at breakneck speed, a steel ghost. The glaring white light of his chest's power source and engines pierced the fog, trailing a distinct trail of pale white flames. No matter how hard he flew, he could find no place to land. "Jarvis, answer me, Jarvis," Stark, from within the Iron Man suit, called out for the 5th time. But, as always, there was no response. From the moment he entered this place, Stark had lost contact with the artificial intelligence. "Jarvis." The network signal read, "None." Logically, Stark was using his own industrial satellite signal. Such a bizarre disconnection shouldn't have occurred anywhere on Earth. Is this really not Earth anymore? Stark felt an inexplicable panic. Even before he became Iron Man, when he was imprisoned in a cave by criminals, he had never felt this panic. Because if this wasn't Earth, he was helpless. There was no way to save himself or return to Earth. What is that? Just then, Stark suddenly saw something floating in the darkness ahead. He used the Iron Man's engines to move closer. As he got closer, Stark was stunned. It was several corpses. They had been in this space for who knew how long. Their humanoid bodies had long decayed to the point of revealing white bones. They wore spacesuits from an unknown civilization, and adorned their chests with strangely shaped laser guns. These corpses even had tails or wings. Stark's eyelids jumped, and his heart was in turmoil. They were alien corpses. In the hotel, the lights were off, and the room was dark and quiet, with only a few rays of silver light falling on the windowsill. Kara, lying in bed, suddenly opened her eyes and tilted her head slightly to look out the windowsill. Was it an illusion? She'd just heard the low growl of an unknown creature, coming from across New York City. The growl carried a distinctly sinister quality. Kryptonian super hearing had a downside. Sometimes, unwanted information flooded into their ears. To the point where, upon waking from sleep, Kara often suspected she was hallucinating, unable to distinguish between the real and the imaginary. Her ability to control her powers was nowhere near as good as her cousin, Carl. After all, as a superhuman, Carl had fully exploited his Kryptonian powers, controlling them with ease. She, on the other hand, had concealed her own Kryptonian abilities to adapt to the human world. If that roar had been real. "Senior, is everything all right?" Kara thought to herself, about to stand. But then, from the side of the bed, a young woman's hands and feet suddenly rested on her. Kara froze, looking back. It was Gwen, already asleep, who had just turned over, using Kara as a cuddle pillow. Her sleeping posture was far from the intellectual grace she'd had when awake. It was even a bit casual. The covers had been pulled back, her dress disheveled, revealing her fair belly. Kara sighed inexplicably and reached over to cover Gwen. Gwen, dreaming, held Kara like her own doll, muttering with a sweet smile, "Nian. Senior, you're the truly shameless one." Kara frowned, unable to resist. She glanced at the windowsill, then closed her eyes. After all, even if that growl was real, it was too far from the streets of Queens. In any case, it couldn't possibly have anything to do with Senior Nian, could it? Deal with the second symbiote. Nian set Peter, unconscious, on the ground. Aunt May, her ears still ringing, immediately rushed forward and pulled Peter into her arms. "He's fine." With these words, Nian leaped forward, his black cat form stomping on lampposts and building walls. With a few deft leaps, though nowhere near the speed of his earlier trio, he vanished from the street with remarkable speed. There was only one symbiote left, the leader of the group. It wasn't over until he was dealt with. From the symbiote venom, Nian had already learned the final symbiote's location. Tonight, it had remained fixed in one place, unmoved. 5 minutes later, in the Bronx, at the Drake Biotech Research Facility, when Nian, still in symbiotic contact with a metadevorer, arrived at the factory gates, he felt the ground shaking violently. His cat-like eyes, gleaming a faint green, lifted their vertical pupils to reveal a spacecraft poised for launch deep within the sealed facility, its tail blazing like a volcanic eruption. The third symbiote, the leader of the symbiotes that arrived on Earth, actually tried to escape. Meanwhile, inside the spaceship, Dr. Drake, the founder of Drake Bio, was alone at the control panel of the spaceship. His eyes and neck were a dark shadow. He was the host of the last symbiote. As for why he was leaving Earth now, it was because he had sensed the deaths of the first and second symbiote's subordinates and witnessed the news reports of the powerful display of the 3-in-1 Nian. No matter how arrogant the leader of the symbiote was, he believed he could not defeat Nian. He knew full well that the next target would be him. He had no choice but to flee Earth. What kind of monster has Venom been parasitized by? It's so powerful. Dr. Drake's face twisted. Being frightened into fleeing the planet would be a lifelong shame. Wait for me, I will definitely be back. Dr. Drake roared inwardly, but outwardly remained calm as he adjusted the launch control of the spaceship. The spaceship continued to jet and take off, about to rise to an altitude of over 100 meters. Suddenly, the ascending spacecraft shuddered inexplicably, as if struck by something. He's coming. Dr. Drake's face changed drastically. Outside the spacecraft, a black kitten, like a tiny thumbtack, was fixed to the spacecraft's coated hull. Since you're here, don't leave. Nian opened his mouth wide, and from it extended 8 ferocious tentacles, covered in tiny teeth. Armed and protected by the symbiote's dark colony, these tentacles were even more resilient and powerful, like the 8 claws of the legendary Kraken. Crack, crack, crack. The tentacles danced wildly, slamming into the spacecraft violently, denting and cracking the metal hull. The pulsing lightning sparked sparks. No. No. Inside the spacecraft, Dr. Drake screamed frantically, feeling despair and frustration, as if he were about to die before he even appeared. What if the third symbiote knew at this moment that Nian was no longer the 3-in-1 entity, but was now a single symbiotic entity with a devourer? If it chose to engage in direct combat, it was hard to predict who would win, and who would lose, and who knew what it would feel. But it was just a hypothetical. The third symbiote was greeted by a raging, scorching flame within the sealed cabin. Boom boom boom. The spacecraft, rising to a height of 500 meters, exploded everywhere, transforming into a massive, blazing fireball. The deafening explosions drowned out the shrill roar of the symbiote known as Riot Within. Chapter 36, Iron Man's Death? The End. Inside a biological research base factory. Inside a sealed and locked office building, a man, relying on the dim light of a flashlight, was rummaging through documents in a darkened archive. Eddie Brock, a renowned New York journalist, had recently stumbled upon the Drake Biological Foundation conducting inhumane human experiments involving mysterious alien life forms, aiming to cultivate more advanced strategic organisms. Eddie had intended to expose this massive conspiracy, but was fired from the media company instead. Desperate, he infiltrated the biological research base, searching for evidence and documents related to human experiments and alien life forms. Got it, this is it. Eddie jolted, pulling a document from the safe and immediately grasping the flashlight in his mouth to begin leafing through it. Alien symbiotes. Venom, Riot, a liquid life form, capable of parasitizing a suitable human host and displaying extraordinary powers. Of the 5 human test subjects, only one succeeded in coexisting with one of the symbiotes. Eddie's fear grew greater and greater as he read. He hurriedly folded the documents and stuffed them into the inside pocket of his jacket. Just as he was about to leave, the entire office building began to tremble violently. The lamps, desks, and cabinets within shook violently, and dust continued to fall from the ceiling. What's going on? Eddie wondered. He looked out the office window and saw the spacecraft launching from the base factory. Boom. Then, the spacecraft, poised to pierce the night sky and escape Earth, exploded violently hundreds of meters in the air. The orange-red flames illuminated the vast space below. Eddie watched in shock, and as a matter of course, he pulled out his small camera to record the scene. Countless fragments of the spacecraft, blazing with flames and thick smoke, streaked across the city sky like a swarm of meteorites, plummeting towards the base. In the camera's lens, a small, black animal silhouette flashed by, illuminating the flames as it fell alongside the wreckage. In a mysterious dimension. Energy shortage. I repeat, we're critically low on energy. The light in Iron Man's chest and eye sockets dimmed. He could only keep his suit's engines running at very low power, stagnating in the center of a space where alien corpses floated. The single white light flickered, fading into darkness. I'm going to die in this unknown place, Stark said with a wry smile. Lost within, he discovered countless alien creatures buried within. Furthermore, the corpses wore varying clothing and weapons. This confirmed what Stark had long suspected: there were clearly more complex and advanced alien civilizations beyond Earth. The creation of the Avengers was the right path forward. Unfortunately, knowing this in advance was useless now. Stark felt helpless. His energy was about to run out, which meant that this would also be his burial place. At this thought, Stark calmed down considerably. He whispered, "Activate the built-in camera and archive your own recordings." Iron Man's helmet glowed, illuminating Stark's weary face. "For Pepper Potts, Virginia Pepper Potts. By the time you see this, I'll probably be dead." Living in an age of alien invasions and mutations, it's true that unexpected events can strike sooner or later. I probably should have been mentally prepared a long time ago, just like the moment I was in New York, and now, suddenly trapped in this inescapable place. I tried my best, I really did. But you have to know, I'm not leaving this here to complain. I just want to tell you that I actually love you very much. He plummeted from 100 meters to the factory floor, scattering debris. He stepped on the ground, creating a depression. Nearby, the remains of the spacecraft and debris also crashed onto the factory buildings, sparking a raging fire. He remained vigilant, carefully sensing the outside world. Only after confirming that the third symbiote was truly dead did he breathe a sigh of relief. Dealing with the third and final symbiote was much easier than expected. It was also because the symbiote went on a rampage, seeking death by attempting to escape on a spaceship, that it instead trapped itself within the sealed cabin, burning to death in extreme suffocation. Of course, if Nian had been a step too late, allowing the symbiote to escape Earth on the spaceship, the outcome would have been different. Now, all three symbiotes were dead, their venom dormant within the Devourer. It's over. Nian's cat claws kicked, his body suddenly accelerating, his small figure leaping over the base factory railing and heading back to the Queen's streets where Gwen and Kara were staying. Halfway there, Nian, parasitized by the Devourer, suddenly remembered something very important. "Oh, I almost forgot." Nian didn't stop. As he soared over the tall building, his cat-like mouth opened ferociously and spat at the city block below. Pa! Suddenly, a golden and red steel body emerged from his mouth, plummeting downward in a free fall. Nian didn't stop, accelerating and disappearing into the city night. Clan. A dull metallic thud echoed as it touched the ground. Iron Man, covered in sticky saliva, sat dazed and stunned in the middle of the street. What had happened? Stark was still a little dazed. What greeted him was the familiar, bustling streets of modern New York, bustling with traffic. Christmas carols began to blare. As the crowd gathered, some began taking photos. Stark was silent for a moment. Instead of feeling the elation of having survived, he felt like cursing. WTF. A last word, recorded in vain? Shortly after Nian left, inside the office building of the biological base factory, Eddie, looking out at the flames that had already spread across most of the factory, panicked and fled. He accidentally kicked a chair, sending him crashing to the floor. His scraped palm burned fiercely. Eddie struggled to get back to his feet, but at that moment, a chilling sensation washed over him. It was as if something had seeped through his wound. He instinctively glanced at his palm, finding nothing there, not even a scratch. It seemed as if his palm hadn't been scratched. The fire was about to reach the office building. Without giving it a second thought, Eddie hurriedly opened the door and fled. Chapter 37 Christmas, Hometown. A light snow fell early in the morning in New York, adding a touch of romance to the economic metropolis. Today was also Christmas, the annual holiday. Christmas trees were decorated everywhere, and festive songs drifted through the streets. Nian, Merry Christmas. Senior, good morning. Two young beauties, each with their own distinct style, one wearing a red reindeer hat, the other dangling an ethereal Christmas bell from her wrist. These were small gifts Nian had bought her the previous day. They emerged side by side, stepping on the snowy streets, creating a striking scene along the pedestrian mall. Merry Christmas, good morning, Nian replied, slung over his backpack, waving back a sleepy Yuan. Inside the backpack, the little Yuan devouring beast king was also fast asleep on a pile of clothes. Nian, what were you doing last night? Gwen asked curiously, noticing the noticeable dark circles under Nian's eyes. Nian rubbed his matted black hair and replied weakly, I was forced to save the world. Liar. Gwen spat in anger. Nian shrugged, knowing Gwen would take it as a joke. Didn't sleep well? Kara asked gently. Yes, Nian nodded, following Kara's lead. I'm not used to hotel beds. Nian himself was quite particular about beds. If he suddenly changed beds, he'd have trouble falling asleep. Well, except for his aunt's bed. Besides, he hadn't slept in a bed last night, he'd slept in a tree like a stray cat, so it was hard not to be sleepy. Fortunately, the symbiotic ability had been lifted on time, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to reunite with Gwen and the others in his human form. Nian sighed. Was it easy for him? After Nian met up with Gwen and Kara, the three of them continued their stroll through the morning market. After a quick lunch, they set off on their return trip to Washington. On the train leaving New York, Gwen and Kara checked their phones and newspapers, beginning to catch up on bits and pieces of information about the city's events the previous night. Iron Man was eaten alive? Scary. What's that gray-green liquid monster? So disgusting. The two women's discussion had initially been relatively normal, but it quickly veered off topic. Wow, that black kitten is so cute. I want to hug it. It's so awesome. Seeing that Gwen and Kara weren't frightened but rather like the black kitten, Nian blinked and said, I think that cat looks a bit like Little Emperor. Huh? Upon hearing this, Gwen and Kara both looked at the orange kitten sleeping on Nian's lap. In fact, the moment they saw the black kitten, they felt it did resemble Little Emperor, whom Nian carried with him. However, after hearing Nian's words, they felt that Little Emperor and the black kitten were very different. The difference was obvious in appearance, fur color, and even aura. In particular, the black kitten's presence in the news reports had evoked a subtle sense of threat in Kara herself, but in her opinion, Little Emperor, even if it was a unique alien creature, posed no threat at all. Seeing Kara shake her head, Gwen retorted with a smile, Little Emperor, it's nothing like that black kitten. Indeed, Nian agreed, breathing a sigh of relief. This hurdle was cleared. But, looking at that black kitten, I feel strangely familiar with it, Gwen muttered doubtfully. Me too. Kara smoothed her platinum gold hair, gleaming in the sunlight, a flicker of doubt in her beautiful eyes. I feel like I've seen it somewhere before. Is this the legendary woman's sixth sense? How could I have? It's so dangerous and terrifying, yet even Iron Man has eaten it. Nian quickly evaded the question, redirecting the conversation. Regardless, after the topic of the silver-haired superhero goddess exploded online, after today, the mysterious black kitten will also become a nightmare for many. For example, a certain billionaire or playboy would often wake up from sleep, dreaming of being swallowed into an unknown dimension again. This also led to the future Stark Industries working overnight to produce the strategic weapon codenamed Anti-Black Flash, Black Kitten, Armor. Washington. He parted with Gwen and Kara at the station. Officer George, who had come to pick Gwen up, gave Nian a meaningful look as he drove away. Nian pretended not to notice. After sending Kara off to a taxi, the sky outside had darkened, the myriad neon lights dimming beneath the snow. Christmas Eve was approaching. Nian thought for a moment, then, shouldering his backpack, headed for another part of the city instead of heading home. Washington, D.C., the Potomac River. The bustling commercial streets beside it were bathed in festive cheer, making the snow-covered trees by the riverbank bridge seem somewhat deserted. Nian arrived, gazing at the perfect figure sitting on a wooden chair by the river, and couldn't help but quicken his pace. Auntie! Are you back? The woman, sitting elegantly on the wooden chair, turned around. Her stunningly delicate face was cool and gentle, her jewel-like eyes reflecting the young man's figure. Nian's heart skipped a beat, and he smiled and nodded, saying, I'm back. Sorry to have kept you waiting. The two had no appointment, no contact, but had come here in perfect tacit understanding. After all, this was where they had first met, exactly on Christmas Eve 16 years ago. 16 years ago today. A demigod completely disillusioned with a human world, and a reincarnated being who had just arrived in this world, the lonely two became a family who would spend the rest of their lives together. Sit down and talk, Diana blinked. Nian put down his school bag and was about to sit down on the wooden chair next to his aunt. His aunt suddenly reached forward with her arms outstretched. The chairs outside are cold. You're treating me like a child again. Nian said this, but his body remained very obedient, sitting on those long, slender, Elastic legs. Who could resist the true fragrance mode? Diana asked softly. That black kitten that appeared in New York, was that you? Yes. Nian nodded, recounting his unexpected encounter with the symbiote venom, the resulting triadic state, and the events surrounding the symbiote's hunt. So that's how it is, Diana thought thoughtfully, looking at the little emperor still sleeping in his school bag. Don't easily enter that uncontrollable state again unless absolutely necessary. I know. Nian agreed. The complex thoughts and extreme temperament that emerged from the triadic state were far more twisted and terrifying than when Venom was alone. However, this would also mean that he would be unable to draw on the power of the symbiote Venom if it revived in the future. After all, once Venom possessed him, he would be forced into triadic mode. Until this problem was resolved, Nian could no longer coexist with Venom. And now, Venom was parasitizing the Devourer, and although dormant, their fluids were likely already flowing. This also meant that Nian could not independently access the Devourer's physical abilities through his master. I have an idea. My aunt's voice suddenly came from behind my ear. Go ahead. Nian nodded. Come home with me, Diana said gently. And, what are you talking about? Of course I have no choice but to go home with you. Nian was confused. Where else can I go for Christmas? I'm not talking about home here in Washington. Diana took a breath and said seriously, come back with me to my hometown. Hometown? Nian was stunned. Chapter 38. A few days on Paradise Island. Nian had heard of Aunt Diana's hometown in the bathtub that night. It wasn't simply New York, a metropolis, or a specific city or town. It was Paradise Island, a land left behind by the ancient gods, inhabited by the Amazons, a warrior race descended from the age of the gods. Feeling the delicate and supple legs of the person sitting on it even through the fabric, Nian asked with some confusion, and, didn't you say you were exiled from Paradise Island? Paradise Island. Founded by Zeus, the king of the Olympian gods, it was surrounded by a magical protective field. Not only was its existence indecipherable to human high-tech equipment from the outside, but once one left the island, they would lose track of its exact landmarks. Because of this, Paradise Island existed both physically on Earth and yet was truly isolated from the human world. When Aunt Diana left Paradise Island during World War I, she had forgotten its coordinates, effectively being exiled forever, unable to return. That's exactly right. Diana nodded slightly, her beautiful eyes gleaming with wisdom. But, thanks to your help, I recently came up with a way to return to Paradise Island. My help? Nian was even more confused. When had he ever helped his aunt? Diana whispered, finding a way to return to Paradise Island isn't important. What's important is, are you willing to go back with me? At this moment, across the river, the modern streets grew increasingly bustling. The night breeze blew away the thin layer of ice on the river's surface. Nian suddenly realized that this was also a choice. Should he choose life in the human world, his identity, everything he had lived through for the past 16 years, or choose to follow his aunt? Was there any need to hesitate? Nian smiled. I do. Diana, with some doubt, asked, even if I never see your friend again? That would be very sad, of course. Nian paused, and said sincerely, but if I never see my aunt again, I'll die. Since ancient times, many heroes have died under skirts. Moreover, he was not a hero, he was actually sitting on them. Well, you want to stay on Paradise Island long term, but my mother won't approve. Diana tapped the back of Nian's head with her finger and smiled. It's been a while since I've seen my people. I'm just going back for a visit. We'll be back together before your vacation is over. So when do we leave? Nian asked curiously. Isn't this just like a few-day trip to Paradise Island? No, more like visiting my aunt's family home, Nian thought. Diana didn't have his thoughts. She said, now, let's go. The next morning, on the Aegean Sea, aboard a massive 3-decker cruise ship. Thanks to Greece's Mediterranean climate, winter doesn't feel cold. Bathed in the brilliant sunshine, passengers flock to the open deck, enjoying the cool sea breeze and the romantic ocean views. Tourists from all over the world, while enjoying themselves, seemed also to be anticipating a wonderful encounter. Men dressed as elegant British gentlemen, and women, mostly in gorgeous, graceful long dresses. Many people chatted and socialized on the deck, admiring the sea view. When a woman stepped onto the cruise ship's deck, all the men's eyes flashed with astonishment, eclipsing the other women vying for attention. The dark-haired woman, clad in a white dress with a slit off the shoulder, bore a delicate, beautiful face as if sculpted by a divine being. Her tall, mature, and flawless figure, framed by the long gown, revealed a sleek, graceful figure. Her every gesture exuded nobility and elegance, her voluptuous, slightly curled hair gleaming. Next to the woman, a youthful-looking boy, handsome and delicate, followed closely behind him, dressed in a fitted shirt and uniform. The two stepped onto the deck side by side from the cabin, like a brother and sister about 10 years apart in age. Immediately, a gentleman on deck took the lead, approaching the woman and politely saying, "Madam, may I have the honor of making your acquaintance?" Without waiting for the mature and stunning woman to respond, he spoke. The young man next to her suddenly asserted his authority, wrapping his arms around her slender waist and, with an equally polite smile, saying, "Excuse me, this is my girlfriend." Girlfriend. At that moment, countless people on deck were stunned, momentarily wondering if they had misheard. The gentleman who had taken off his hat to chat was also stunned, his gaze instinctively turning towards the woman. Diana remained silent, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips, as if tacitly acknowledging her identity. Nian blinked and said, "Uncle, could you please make way?" "Me, uncle?" The gentleman's mouth twitched, as if struck by a fatal blow, and he dejectedly stepped aside. Seeing this, the other gentleman didn't bother to chatter up, but suddenly felt that the woman lingering around them was less attractive. Reaching the pinnacle of humanity at such a young age, driving a stately car, there was truly no comparison. Nian, holding Diana's arm, approached the deck railing, where they were greeted by the vast, boundless blue sea. Diana glanced at Nian and suddenly asked, "Just now, what did you say I was to you?" "Little." Nian opened his mouth, then said decisively, "Auntie." "Really?" Diana's face was expressionless. "Of course. Let go of your hand." "Oh." Nian withdrew his hand awkwardly, looking a little aggrieved. Diana seemed to realize her tone had been a bit harsh, and couldn't help but add softly, "Don't hug me like that outside." Nian's heart skipped a beat. So, did that mean he could hug her freely at home, not outside? Perfect understanding. "If I want to hug her tonight," Nian couldn't help but ask, feeling that he still needed his aunt's personal approval. Diana turned away, staring intently at the sea ahead, as if she hadn't heard him. It seemed like a lost cause. Nian didn't feel much pity. If he really did hug her, he'd be the one to suffer in the end. Diana suddenly spoke up, "I've remembered something about the location of Paradise Island." "That's great. Think about it more carefully." Nian's eyes lit up, and he stopped talking, letting his aunt focus. If one possessed divine power, one would surely be able to see this. Diana's right hand clutched a golden lasso. The other end of the lasso was bound to her left wrist. The golden lasso, used to bind others, could force them to reveal the truth. There was a hidden principle at work here. Even the most forgotten things, deep within the depths of memory, would be forced back into her memory. Inspired by the last time she bound Nian, Diana now used the lasso of truth on herself, borrowing the artifact's power to defy the laws of Paradise Island and remind herself of the island's correct coordinates. Chapter 39 Arrival at Paradise Island, Identity. "I remember now." Diana's beautiful eyes suddenly opened, and she inexplicably reminded him, "Nian, get ready." "Get ready? Get ready for what?" Nian turned to look at his aunt, noticing that her off-shoulder, slit white dress had transformed into the crimson armor she wore in battle. A shield and silver sword slung across her back, the crowns and bracelets on her forehead and wrists gleamed brightly in the sunlight. "And, you look like this." Nian turned back in shock, her hurried words fading. The many tourists on the deck continued to observe the scenery and socialize, none of them glancing at the disguised Aunt Diana, as if they no longer existed on the deck. "Don't worry, they can't see," Diana said, reaching out and lifting Nian up. She lifted the golden lasso in her right hand and crouched slightly, gathering her strength. Realizing what his aunt was about to do, Nian cried out, "Wait! I'm not ready yet." Before Nian could finish, Diana leaped with lightning speed, leaping dozens of meters ahead of the cruise ship. As they were about to land on the sea, Diana swung the golden rope forward, catching the crest of a wave rising in the distance. Using the force, she soared high into the waters ahead. It looked as if she were speeding across the surface, sending up a trail of ripples. "Look! What's that?" The passengers on the deck looked toward the sea ahead of the cruise ship. They could only see a straight white streak, mistaking it for a tuna or some other marine creature. They watched as the white water arrow rapidly vanished into the Aegean Sea. Diana was like a humanoid fighter jet diving low over the sea. Nian, in her arms, pulled a pair of goggles from his pocket and put them on, finally able to open his eyes against the oncoming hurricane. The sea was visibly receding, quickly leaving the yacht far behind and eventually disappearing. Above the vast ocean, only Diana and Nian swooped down. And so, they advanced for 10 kilometers, perhaps even hundreds, to some unknown destination. Then, with a pop, Diana led Nian through an invisible barrier. Nian's eyes widened as the once boundless deep blue sea suddenly transformed into a clear, shallower turquoise. Amidst vast reefs, guarded like soldiers, a majestic archipelago sat at the deepest point of the sea. The largest and most central island, flanked by a golden quicksand beach, nestled within towering mountains. Atop the peaks and cliffs, nestled numerous white temples and sanctuaries in the distinctive style of ancient Greece. A massive waterfall, like a crown crowned from the peaks, cascaded majestically, creating a dazzling rainbow halo. Nian knew it all at a glance, needing no explanation from his Aunt Diana. This was the lingering land of the old Olympian gods, a dreamlike paradise island, isolated from the human world and free from worldly strife. Paradise Island. On the beach just offshore, a group of fierce female warriors, clad in ancient Greek leather armor and battle armor, wielding bows, arrows, metal spears, and other cold weapons, watched the unknown entity approaching rapidly from the offshore waters, forming a cascade of water arrows. They stood in full battle formation, shields raised, bows drawn, and the sharp tips of their spears and swords pointed outward. The leading female general sat atop a powerful black horse, wielding a silver longsword. Her face was stern and resolute, her exposed muscles a bronze hue. She exuded a domineering and murderous aura far beyond that of most men. Just as the Amazons were about to attack the invaders, the female general, observing the approaching invaders, suddenly shuddered and shouted, "Everyone, lower your weapons." "General." "What?" The female warriors were confused, but they obeyed the command and sheathed their weapons. Trample. An invader, no, two invaders, arrived at the beach of Paradise Island from the outer sea at breakneck speed. Seeing the woman in the battle dress, adorned with the distinctive crown of the Amazon royal family, the Amazon warriors on the scene were stunned. Then, with immense excitement, they placed their hands on their hearts and knelt on one knee to demonstrate their loyalty and support. "Your Highness. Your Highness Diana, is that you?" The general dismounted from her black horse, her whole body trembling as she spoke in disbelief. Diana lowered Nian from her arms and, unable to conceal her joy, hurried forward. "Yes, Antiope, Auntie. I'm back." The two embraced tightly. Nian smiled, tactfully staying aside, not disturbing her aunt's reunion with her family. Antiope's once stern face brightened with a smile. She patted Diana on the back and said excitedly, "Good, good, you're back. Your mother, and all the Amazons have been eagerly awaiting your return." "Mother, is she okay?" Diana asked softly. "I'm fine, but I'm also very worried about you," Antiope said with a smile, urging, "Come back with me to the palace so your mother and the tribe can see you." "Antiope, wait a moment," Diana shook her head. By then, the Amazons had all turned their attention to Nian, standing behind Diana. Human. Many of the female warriors instinctively cast sharp glances of rejection and hostility. "Your Highness Diana," Antiope said, looking at Nian nearby, her face returning to its previous sternness and indifference. "You should know that Paradise Island is off limits to outsiders. Especially not a human male." Antiope turned to Nian. "Who are you?" I am." Nian hesitated. Faced with General Antiope and a group of fierce and stern Amazon warriors, he suddenly didn't know how to describe his identity. The most appropriate description would be Diana's adopted son? In truth, Nian had always instinctively rejected the status of adopted son. Therefore, since childhood, he had called Diana Aunt, a title Diana tacitly agreed to. However, if he didn't now claim to be an adopted son and refer to himself as Diana's relative, it would clearly be difficult for the Amazons to accept him. Just as Nian hesitated, Diana stepped forward. Diana offered no explanation, her stunningly delicate face remaining calm. Standing close to Xinian, she suddenly raised her hands and removed the tiara that so embodied her status. Your Highness Diana, what are you trying to do? Antiope, as if realizing something, exclaimed in surprise. Ignoring Antiope's words of disapproval, Diana smiled faintly and, under the astonished gaze of the Amazon warrior, placed her own silver tiara on Xinian's head. Xinian blinked, unable to grasp the meaning of this. Chapter 40 You are her monarch. On the beach of Paradise Island, General Antiope and the Amazon warriors, faces ranging from shock to confusion to anger, fell silent. No need for further explanation. The Amazon Princess Diana made her position clear when she placed her sacred artifact, the Starlight Crown, on the head of a human male. His name is Nian, Nian Prince, Diana said softly, as if announcing something. Oh, good afternoon, it's a beautiful day today, and, nice to meet you all. To avoid an awkward silence, Nian, wearing a gorgeous crown, took the initiative to wave and greet the female warriors warmly. However, no one responded, and the silence deepened. Nian stopped waving, his scalp tingling. This was truly embarrassing, the ultimate embarrassment. Even so, he can't enter the main island of Paradise Island without the Queen's order. Antiope's chest heaved, her fists clenched, and she looked at Nian with an icy gaze. Nian suddenly felt a familiar look. That's a lot like the way Officer George often looked at him. I know. I'm going to see the Queen Mother right away. Diana nodded and said, Antiope, could you please arrange some accommodations for Xinian at the archipelago building next to the main island? He'll need to stay here for a few days. No problem. Despite his reluctance, Antiope finally gritted his teeth and agreed to Diana's request. Xinian, Diana said softly, turning back to him, you go with my aunt, Antiope, to the accommodations I've arranged. I'll come see you later after I see the Queen Mother. Okay, go ahead. Xinian agreed, thinking it was just a visit to a tourist island with poor service, no big deal. Come with me. Antiope gave him a blank look, then mounted her black horse. Far from the royal palace and the Amazonian settlements, on the cliffside of Paradise Island, facing the open sea, stood a large and unique ancient round building. Antiope led Xinian to the main entrance. Gazing at the intact building, resembling the remains of an ancient temple, Xinian asked in disbelief, is this my place to stay? Actually, it doesn't have to be this nice. Antiope, riding ahead on a black horse, ignored him and approached the ancient building's door. She addressed the silver-armored female guardsmen stationed on either side, give him a spare guardhouse. Yes, General. The two female guards at the door quickly complied. They gazed curiously at the first human boy to arrive, and upon seeing the familiar crown adorning his head, they shared the same shock as the female warriors had. Why are you looking at me like that again? Xinian muttered to himself, completely confused by the meaning of the crown. Keep an eye on him, don't let him wander, Antiope said to the female guards. He left Xinian alone at the ancient building's entrance and rode away on his black horse, never once meeting Xinian's face or speaking to him. After Antiope's swift, dust-filled departure, Xinian left. One of the female guards respectfully addressed Xinian, Your Highness, please follow me in. Your Highness. Xinian was stunned for a moment, watching the female guard enter the ancient building. He suddenly felt that the people here were quite polite. Xinian followed the female guard through the entrance. The deeper he went, the more he felt something was amiss. The inner walls of this ancient building were incredibly thick, with no doors or windows. The only main entrance was a crowded, 2-meter-high corridor. It looked more like a secret place for holding prisoners or storing items than a residence. This is it. The female guard led Xinian into the corridor, stopping at the side. She pushed on a brick, and a hidden door in the wall slowly opened, sending a shower of loose dust down. Ahem. The female guard and Xinian coughed. When the dust cleared, a faint blue hanging lamp on the high wall of the inner room behind the secret door automatically lit up. Peering inside, he saw a small, square room, less than 20 square meters. The room was equipped with a weapon rack and 2 very simple beds. Apart from that, there was nothing else. The corner of Xinian's mouth twitched slightly. The small dark room was fine, but the weapon rack and the bed were covered with thick dust. It had been unknown how long since anyone had lived there. Your Highness, please wait a moment. I'll help you clean it up. The female guard waved the dust in the room and said apologetically, this room was prepared for the guards who were on duty here late at night when this building was designed. But later, Most of the guard station here withdrew, so it has been vacant and has not been cleaned. Guard? What the hell is guarding? Xinian was a little confused. Would they set up a detention center for him to live in? Or maybe they just didn't treat him as a human being and locked him up like a criminal. It's just an item. The female guard said as she packed up, that thing is in the deepest part of this building, but it's nothing to see. I guarded it for about 10 years, and before me, we Amazons have guarded it for thousands of years. Can you let me live in such an important place? Xinian became more and more panicked. It needs to be closely guarded by guards for 1,000 years. No one would believe that there is no problem here. It's nothing. As long as it doesn't leave here. It hasn't shown any abnormalities in the past 1,000 years, so don't worry. The female guard shrugged and said, what's more, you are the monarch of that place. It's a shame for you to live here with such a noble status. Wait? Xinian raised his eyebrows. Monarch, what do you mean? The female guard was also puzzled, pointing to the crown he was wearing. Isn't that a Royal Highness Princess Diana? That's right. Xinian nodded. That's correct, the female guard confirmed, then said solemnly, we Amazons are adorned with a crown from the moment we're born. The royal family wears a diadem, the warriors wear a tiara. It's a lifelong symbol of our identity and honor. Then this crown is on my head now. Xinian's eyes widened in realization. It means she has given you her honor, her identity, everything she holds most valuable. You are her monarch. We share honor and disgrace, marching and retreating on the same side. At this, the female guard sighed, her eyes fixed on Xinian through the slit in her helmet. I don't know why that highness chose a human like you as her partner. Of course, that's not for me to judge. I can only respect her choice. Xinian fell silent. He wasn't surprised. Instead, the crown on his head felt heavy, almost suffocating. It was impossible for Aunt Diana to choose him as her partner. This was probably just like how he had deliberately called her little girlfriend to flirt with her. It was simply to give him a more legitimate identity and allow him to stay on Paradise Island. But a woman as independent, intelligent, beautiful, powerful, and perfect as Aunt Diana, yet a proud and noble deity like her, like an accessory, declared that she had placed everything she represented on him. Even Xinian felt that the price was not worth it for Aunt Diana. Chapter 41 The Trembling Mother Box. After the female guard cleaned up and left the darkened room, Xinian lay alone on his relatively clean bed, clutching his aunt's starlight crown tightly in his arms. The flickering, cool light of the fire fell on him. Of course, he couldn't return the crown. After all, returning it would be an insult to Aunt Diana. But this crown was simply too heavy. In every way, it was the most precious thing in the world, beyond measure. Can I bear it? Xinian lay on the bed for a long time, then finally sighed, replaced the crown on his head, and stood up to leave the room. Even without claustrophobia, it was a bit too stuffy in here, and he wanted to get some fresh air. However, Xinian was halfway to the door when he remembered that General Antiope had ordered the female guards at the door not to let him move around. Now, he fully understood why Antiope had treated him so harshly. If anyone had their eyes on Aunt Diana, Xinian's attitude would have been 100 times worse. And if he had known in advance the significance behind his aunt's possession of the jeweled crown, Xinian would never have let his aunt wear it on her head. If he had forced himself to go out for a walk as His Highness, the female guard would not have dared to stop him. However, Xinian did not want to embarrass the female guard, so he turned back in the corridor. Back to his door. Xinian suddenly stopped and looked into the depths of the corridor inside the ancient building. There was some light at the end of the corridor, and a subtle breeze came through the dark corridor. Since you are not allowed to walk around outside, it doesn't matter if you walk around inside, right? Xinian shrugged. Besides, the female guard just said that as long as you don't take the objects inside out, there will be no problem. Xinian didn't think too much about it, and without stopping, he continued to walk deeper into the ancient building. This wall is really thick. The further Xinian walked into the corridor, the more surprised he felt. This ancient circular building, aside from the dark room he'd just been in, contained virtually no other rooms. It was entirely solid brick, with only a narrow corridor leading to the interior. Imagine that? Its design resembled a sealed piquet ball. Once the corridor was closed, no one could escape. Perhaps, only a trinity of form could force its way out while trapped inside. Xinian pondered, suddenly remembering the metamorphosis. His aunt hadn't been able to bring it to Paradise Island, so Seed entrusted it to a friend with experience raising pets for a few days. Was that friend's name Barry Allen? Zinnian quickly reached the innermost recesses of the building. The moment he emerged from the corridor, the view before him opened up. Inside lay a spacious, antique-style hall. Strange stone carvings and ancient Greek inscriptions surrounded the hall, as if chronicling a long, unknown history of the old gods. Light, a cool breeze, and air seeped in through the gaps in the star-shaped metal railings on the hall's roof. Faint beams of light, barely discernible, shone down, delicately landing on the stone altar in the center of the ancient building's main hall. Atop the 2-meter-tall altar sat a mysterious cube, resembling a rusted metal box. The iron box had sat there for who knows how long, its shimmering light, the dust, and even the passage of time, all languishing beside it. This is the thing that has guarded it for over 1,000 years. Nian was stunned. He finally understood why no one had been able to touch it for 1,000 years. Putting aside the fact that Paradise Island was enshrined in Zeus's barrier in the Amazon's rotating guards, just its pitiful appearance, who would want this shabby box? Of course, perhaps it contained a hidden artifact. Nian didn't intend to investigate. He stood before the stone altar and began his middle school chest lifting exercises. He took a deep breath, the air in the innermost hall now flowing through to the outside world, and Nian felt a sudden sense of relief. But then, suddenly, his peripheral vision seemed to catch a glimpse of something. Nian paused, his gaze fixed in wonder on the iron box atop the stone altar. Just now. Did that thing move? Paradise Island, the Amazon Palace. The palace was a splendid spectacle, and every single piece of furnishings, including the still-working golden chairs and beaded curtains, would be a sought-after collector's item if left outside. "Mother," Diana said as she entered the palace and crouched down on a chair. Sitting on the golden chair, a dignified woman who bore a striking resemblance to Diana, with a face and figure that didn't seem old at all, and wearing a golden crown, Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons, couldn't help but smile with genuine excitement. Hippolyta reached forward, gently touching Diana's face with her palm. "My child, you suffered all alone out there." "No," Diana shook her head gently, grasping her mother's hand. "Mother, I'm fine. I can take care of myself." "Of course I know. After all, you're the only daughter of my Amazon queen." Hippolyta smiled and nodded, then suddenly paused, glancing at Diana's forehead. "Diana, your starlight crown." "Mother, I was just about to tell you this. I didn't come back alone this time." Diana smiled happily, and said with great seriousness and pride, "I gave it to someone, a human." Ancient building, main hall. Zinnian stared at the iron box in a daze. Hadn't the female guard just said that this thing hadn't been moved in 1,000 years? Why did he just see the iron box shake slightly? Was he dazzled, seeing things? That possibility couldn't be ruled out. Zinnian had only caught a glimpse out of the corner of his eye, and it was likely that the interference of light and shadow had made him mistakenly think the box had moved. Just to confirm. Holding his breath, Zinnian approached the stone altar. As he drew closer, 3 meters, he could see more clearly. The iron box on the altar bore strange patterns, resembling stars and the sun. A thick layer of dust accumulated on the box's surface. The beams of light from the building's dome bathed him. Instinctively, Zinnian reached out toward the box, trying to wipe away the accumulated dust. His fingers edged closer. Just before his fingertips touched the box, Zinnian quickly withdrew his hand. What was he doing? Touching other people's things wasn't a good habit. However, looking at the dust coating the box, Zinnian confirmed that he had indeed misjudged it. If the box had truly been shaken, some of the dust would surely have fallen off. Forget it, let's go back. Zinnian gave up exploring the broken box and turned to leave the main hall. Zinnian hadn't noticed. He had barely left the main hall and entered the corridor. The iron box resting on the stone altar trembled slightly, sending a cloud of dust flying. Before the dust settled, it mysteriously vanished into the hall. The box trembled as if possessing a life of its own. As if in fear, dreading something. But this trembling quickly returned to the calm it had maintained for millennia. It continued to lie dormant, waiting for its opportunity. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Times have changed. Inside the Amazon palace, Diana's beautiful eyes sparkled as she met the Amazon queen's gaze naturally, like a female knight with proud, radiant wings, rather than the princess once protected and loved by all the Amazons. Mother, when I was a child, didn't you say that humans were the most miraculous, powerful, and limitless artifacts created by the gods? She paused and said sincerely, when I went to the human world outside, I was full of hope, but soon became completely disappointed with them. So, I actually exiled myself, choosing to stay in that world to find an answer for my heart. Did you find it? Hippolyta's frown softened, and she looked at her only daughter calmly. Yes, I understand what you said. Diana smiled faintly. Xinian, he is the miracle I chose, and the answer I want to find. Hippolyta was silent for a moment, then asked softly, why are you so confident in him? Diana's heroic eyebrows spread like swords, and she said seriously, I have confidence in myself, so I made this decision. She gently held her mother's hand and whispered, Mother, you won't blame me, will you? How could I? Hippolyta shook her head and looked at her. You are my daughter. No matter what you decide, I support you. At this time, from outside the palace gate, the female general Antiope walked in angrily. As soon as she stepped through the door, she said in a deep voice, I disagree. Antiope. Hippolyta raised her eyes and glanced at her. Your Majesty. Antiope knelt on one knee in the palace hall, then repeated, I disagree with Her Highness Diana's choice. She is a princess of our Amazon race. How could she risk everything on a weak, young human? She couldn't understand, couldn't accept it. Antiope, Diana was about to speak, but Hippolyta patted the back of her hand and said to Antiope, you're still as hot-tempered as ever. Do you remember when Diana was little? Antiope frowned, unsure of what the queen was about to say. Hippolyta whispered, when Diana was little, she loved to spy on your daily training with the Amazons. Out of love for her, I didn't want her to become a warrior, so I reprimanded her many times and publicly forbade Diana from handling weapons. But in the end, she still sneaked away to train with you. This. Antiope opened her mouth, but hesitated. I think you're well aware of this, Hippolyta sighed. Neither you nor I could influence Diana's childhood, so how could we possibly influence her choices as an adult? You said she was exceptional, and now this is the decision she's made. How can you question her? Antiope fell silent. She clenched her fists tightly, then gradually loosened them. Resignedly, she uttered, I respect Her Highness Diana's decision. From the moment Amazon Queen Hippolyta and General Antiope ceased their vero, no one on Paradise Island could question Diana's decision. This marked the rise of Xinian's status and position on Paradise Island to the same level as that of Amazon Princess Diana. Diana suddenly said, Antiope, I have another favor to ask of you. It's about Xinian. Queen Hippolyta was slightly stunned. Entrusting Antiope with matters concerning Xinian, wasn't that unreliable? Antiope raised a brow and said, Your Highness, Diana, please. Diana whispered, I think we should let Xinian. In the ancient building. Xinian, lying in a small, dark room, collapsed from hunger on his bed. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Someone was finally here. Xinian sat up abruptly and saw the female guard from before hurried in, holding a set of clothes. Your Highness, change quickly. General Antiope wants to see you. Is dinner ready? Xinian took the clothes the female guard handed him and, without a second thought, stripped off his shirt, sending the female guard scurrying out in panic. Why? It's not like I've ever seen a man before, Xinian muttered. He changed into the clothes and headed outside the ancient building. He emerged from the long, dark corridor. Reaching the doorway, Xinian felt as if he had seen the light of day again. He glanced down at his newly changed clothes. Well, at least this time, it was proper men's clothing, a brown linen short-sleeved top and leggings for easy movement, also characteristic of ancient Greek clothing. However, these leggings looked newly remade, with new threads. Before Xinian could think, the sound of hooves and neighs echoed up ahead, and a group of female cavalrymen quickly appeared in front of the ancient building on the cliff edge. Leading the charge, on a black horse, was, of course, General Antiope. Antiope glanced at Xinian at the doorway, whispered a few words to the female guards, and then said to the female cavalryman behind her, Leave him a horse. A horse? Xinian's mouth twitched as a female cavalryman approached, pulling a sturdy, handsome white steed. Sir, Times have changed. Can we get some modern transportation? Seeing Antiope and the female knight staring at him, Xinian could only exchange glances with a nearby white horse. As if sensing his distress, the female guard stepped forward and asked, "Your Highness, may I help you mount your horse?" "I'll leave it to you." Xinian was deeply moved. Then, he took flight, thrown 2 or 3 meters high by the female guard, landing on the back of a white horse. The horse, startled, leaped wildly, carrying Xinian, and took off like an arrow. "Go." Antiope stomped her feet, leading the female cavalry in pursuit of the white horse. Horizontal ellipsis. Surrounded by the female cavalry, the white horse began to slow its pace. Xinian, still trembling in the saddle, was fortunately able to grab the reins in time, otherwise he would have been thrown off. Catching his breath on the white horse, Xinian realized the female cavalry had slowed down not for his own good, but because they had entered the town of Paradise Island. A wide, smooth, white stone road snaked through the mountain path, with countless white buildings standing on either side. As the female cavalry escorted Xinian through the town, hundreds of local residents in long white dresses, even armed soldiers standing guard, gathered beside the road and gazed at Xinian, standing in the center of the procession, their eyes tinged with wonder. Xinian suddenly felt as if he were visiting his partner's home for the first time, surrounded by relatives and scrutinized by them. This wasn't just a group of relatives, it was a tribe, a race. But that wasn't the point. The point was that they were all women. Not a single man. And not a single elderly person, aged beyond 50. Xinian finally understood why her men's clothing was newly made. Because men's clothing wasn't needed on this island. Paradise Island? Why not change the name to the Kingdom of Women? Chapter 43. Don't bow your head, the crown will fall. Antiope led a team of female knights, accompanied by Xinian, through the town of Paradise Island and onto a mountain top. Xinian, perched on a white horse, was suddenly struck by a dazzling scene. It was as if a mighty force had shaved off the peak, revealing a vast, natural training ground. Within, the grounds were carpeted with soft grass, while the horizons opened outward to the boundless sky and ocean. On this pristine grassy field, dozens of tall, bare-chested female warriors, clad in battle skirts, engaged in fierce and earnest sparring. Each of them possessed physical prowess exceeding that of an average human, and they wielded real swords and spears. The fierce clash of blades and tips sent sparks flying, and the clang of metal clashing resounded endlessly. These were the female Amazon warriors. A modern human army of equal size would undoubtedly be crushed to pieces. Facing an invader, they would rush to the front lines and engage in a brutal battle. Seeing Antiope arrive on her black horse, the female warriors on the training ground all paused and saluted respectfully in unison, "General." Then, their undisguised hostility, like the sharp edges of swords, fell upon the young man behind Antiope. Without needing to explain, everyone knew Xinian's identity instantly. After all, being human, and male at that, was incredibly recognizable on Paradise Island. Furthermore, he wore the Starlight Crown, the royal family's special crown. If looks could kill, Xinian would have been killed countless times. Xinian sighed, understanding the current hostility of the Amazon warriors. These female warriors were even more fierce and aggressive than the female guards. To them, who valued strength, a mere human like him was far from worthy of being an Amazon princess. But, understanding didn't mean accepting. They could certainly look down on him as a human, but now he wore his aunt's crown. Xinian, who had previously struggled to sit on his white horse, glared coldly, looking up and confronting each of the hostile female warriors. Illuminated by the golden sunlight, the Starlight Crown shone with a majestic, shimmering halo, making the young Xinian, seated on his white horse, seem like a true member of royalty. Many Amazons instinctively avoided his gaze, not daring to look directly at him. Antiope was a little surprised. She had deliberately pitted the bravest and most powerful female warriors against Xinian, hoping to intimidate him and show him that he couldn't bear the weight of the crown. But Antiope was wrong, utterly wrong. In fact, Xinian himself believed he couldn't bear the weight of his aunt's crown, but as long as it remained on his head for even a second, he would never yield to anyone, never to allow its glory to be tarnished. To do so would damage the dignity and honor of his Aunt Diana. This was Xinian's Achilles heel. Antiope seemed to suddenly come to her senses and shouted to the female warriors, "Hurry up and salute." The female warriors glanced at each other, but no matter how reluctant they were, they saluted Xinian on the white horse, wearing the magnificent crown. Greetings, Your Highness. Xinian patted the white horse, and even the white horse obeyed, bowing obediently. Antiope dismounted from the black horse and gave the female warriors instructions, rest here for now. After lunch, we will resume training. Yes, General. The female warriors gathered their weapons. A moment later, ordinary civilians arrived with figs, cheese, bread, and freshly grilled meat. The female warriors were not shy and gathered in circles to eat. The horses were tethered to the side of the grass. Xinian sat down alone on the grass, and soon, a generous meal was brought to him. Your Highness, this is how we Amazon warriors typically eat lunch. If you're not used to it, I can arrange for you to eat indoors. Antiope approached, clutching a roasted leg of lamb. Perhaps due to Xinian's intervention, her demeanor had improved considerably, and her expression was much less icy. Just think of it as a picnic. It's quite a treat. Xinian shrugged, rinsed his hands with water, and began to eat the bread and grilled meat right there. He was truly hungry. Antiope watched Xinian, who was enjoying his meal, and suddenly felt lost. She remembered how Diana, as a child, had refused to eat lunch inside the palace after being approved to train with the other warriors, instead dining with them on the grass in the training grounds. Antiope said, "Thank you." What? Xinian looked at her, puzzled. "Thank you for defending Her Highness Diana's honor," Antiope said expressionlessly. "You don't need to thank me," Xinian said bluntly. "She's family. This is my duty." Family duty. A flicker of color flashed in Antiope's eyes. After lunch, Xinian thought he could go back to rest, but then Antiope suddenly stood up and grabbed two gleaming Greek swords from the weapon rack beside the training ground. With a swish, Antiope held one of the Greek swords in her own hand, and planted the other at an angle in the grass in front of Xinian. "Come on. What are you doing?" Xinian frowned at the long swords. This scene caught the attention of all the female warriors on the field, and they all came to watch. "It's my duty to invite you to battle," Antiope said coldly. "Now, it's your duty, take up your sword and fight me." "I don't know how to use a sword." Xinian hadn't finished his words when Antiope suddenly sprinted forward, wielding the Greek longsword with a gust of wind, swinging it at Xinian. "Damn, serious?" Xinian's brown eyes suddenly constricted. Almost instinctively, he grabbed the longsword stuck in the ground with both hands, pulled it out, and held it horizontally in front of him to block. Clang. A sword flew out, spinning several times, and stuck diagonally into the grass behind Xinian. Xinian looked at his empty hands, feeling a sharp pain in his palm. It was Antiope who rushed forward, and suddenly changed from chopping to stabbing, and kicked the sword out of Xinian's hand. Duty requires corresponding ability to fulfill. Antiope looked at Xinian coldly, too weak. "You want to take away the most precious treasure of this island? As the evil wolf and scorpion guarding Her Highness Diana, I have the obligation to bite your neck at any time." Xinian did not speak, but turned around, pulled out the sword again, and held it in his hand. "Come again." Facing the strongest general of the Amazon tribe, the human boy wearing a star crown said firmly. Chapter 44, Lightning, the situation reverses. At this time, in Washington, D.C., a young white man in his early 20s, carrying a backpack, yawned sleepily as he took out his key and entered his home. He changed into his slippers at the door. "Oh, right," Barry Allen suddenly remembered. Last night, a friend had entrusted him with a kitten. The kitten had been sleeping from last night until this morning, and he wondered if it had woken up yet. Thinking of this, Barry pulled a can of small fish from his backpack and headed to his room. He opened the door and saw the unzipped pet bag on the table. The small orange kitten that had been curled up inside was gone. Where did it go? Barry muttered, but he wasn't too worried. With extensive pet care experience and plans to apply for a job at a pet store soon, he had already closed the doors and windows and unplugged the electrical outlet before leaving home that morning. Even if the kitten wandered around, it shouldn't be dangerous. Huh? Barry seemed to notice something and stared blankly at the front of his desk. Wait, where's his chair? Where did it go? A chair that large, that had been in the room, had vanished out of thin air? Just as Barry thought his house was being burglarized, a soft meow echoed from behind him. He turned to see a harmless-looking orange kitten standing in front of the door, gazing at him with a wary and cautious expression. "Kitty, you're here," Barry breathed a sigh of relief, shaking the can of fish in his hand. "Look, I brought you some food." He walked forward, about to approach the kitten. Something unexpected happened. The kitten suddenly opened its bloody maw, and several thick, terrifying tentacles extended from its mouth, sweeping towards Barry in the room at high speed. Barry's eyes widened in shock. Just as he was about to lose his balance, a faint electric current appeared beside him. In the next instant, the kitten, the room, and even the world itself, everything fell silent. No, not silent. Barry was so fast, time seemed to pause for him. Entering a state of power, Barry sank into silence as he surveyed the nearly frozen devourer before him. He remembered something. His friend seemed to have warned him that this kitten was a little special. Special? It wasn't a cat. Paradise Island, on the training grounds. Clang. For the umpteenth time, the Greek sword in Xenian's grasp was blasted out of his grasp. Pinch of the grass. Xenian's palm was red, practically oozing blood. Despite this, he showed no sign of surrendering. He once again reached for the sword, his right hand gripping it firmly. Again. Xenian gasped, his grip firmly fixed on the sword as he once again faced the still-breathing Antiope. A large group of female warriors surrounded the two of them, and beyond, many Amazon residents stood by the buildings, watching the battle unfold despite the disparity in power. It's useless. Antiope's face was expressionless. He quickly approached Nian and brought down a sword with both strength and speed. Nian tried his best to block it with his sword, but he was thrown back with both the sword and himself, falling heavily on the grass. The surrounding female warriors and residents shook their heads. Only Antiope on the field suddenly revealed a subtle expression. This time, Nian held the sword firmly and did not let it slip out of his hand. Of course, there was a price to pay. When Nian supported himself with his sword, a drop of blood flowed down through his fingers and fell on the hilt of the Greek sword. Antiope looked at the young man, who had risen to his feet, and said coldly, "It's useless. Just give up." "Antiope, you're right." Xenian, gripping his sword, smiled and said, "If I want to protect her in the future, I'll have to get even stronger." He asked, baffled, Are you sweating?" "It's just the sun. You're not strong enough to make me sweat." Antiope glanced down at her own body. Honestly, Xenian was indeed more resilient than she'd imagined. But that was all. She saw no hope in him. This only made Antiope feel a wave of disappointment, and she once again began to question the princess's choice. Trample. At that moment, Xenian, seemingly dragging his sword, charged at Antiope. Antiope's brows arched, completely unprepared for the other to take the initiative. "It's useless." Antiope shook her head, ready to draw her sword to counter, but halfway through, Xenian threw his sword towards her. "Abandoning it? Foolish." Antiope growled, and with a swipe of his longsword, he instantly knocked the thrown sword to the ground. Simultaneously, Xenian rushed close to Antiope, clenching his sword hand into a fist and striking with all his might at Antiope's exposed shoulder. Antiope's body remained motionless, like a massive mountain, too immovable for even a human teenager to move. "You lose." Antiope's right hand transformed into a hand blade, slashing towards Xenian's neck. But before the blade could fall, a hand suddenly grasped his wrist. It was Xenian's hand. Now, a glint flashed in Xenian's eyes. With a sharp twist of his waist, he lifted Antiope's entire body and swung it violently towards the open space to the side. Antiope's sword fell from his hand, and Xenian grabbed it. Snap! Not only Antiope, who fell 10 meters, but even the female warriors on the field were stunned, staring at Xenian, the lone warrior standing. The situation had been so one-sided, yet it had suddenly been reversed. What had happened in that instant? What the hell? Antiope, sprawled on the ground, was still dazed, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. A power comparable to her own, no, even more powerful than her own, had just been transmitted from Xenian's hand. Of course, she had no idea. The moment Xenian delivered that punch, the blood on his hand had merged with the sweat on Antiope's body, fulfilling the prerequisite for triggering the master of the familiar. Antiope's physical strength, superimposed on Xenian's, had caused the reversal. The general was repelled. How is this possible? Wow, amazing. After a burst of shocked and boisterous chatter, applause erupted over the training ground. The Amazons didn't care. The youth's unyielding courage, as well as his spectacular comeback at the end, were enough to inspire a touch of respect in them, and a sense of shame for their earlier disrespect. Looking at Xenian, crowned and sword-wielding, who had transformed everyone present, Antiope let on a look of "I've been defeated," Your Highness Diana, is this what you call a miracle? Chapter 45, Spiritual Pillow. At night, the sky above Paradise Island was dotted with stars. Inside the ancient circular building, bright, cool moonlight streamed through the gaps between the star-shaped iron windows of the main hall. In the dark and silent single corridor, accompanied by a rustling sound, a young figure dragged a heavy object into the hall. Mother box. Nian breathed a sigh of relief, placed the mattress from the small dark room in a corner of the open-air main hall, and then lay down on it, completely exhausted. The small dark room was too confining. It would be better to sleep in the airy main hall, where there was nothing else besides the box. Is it okay with me sleeping here, my box neighbor? Nian asked sincerely, as if possessed by a strange force. He glanced at the iron box on the stone altar not far away. The mother box remained motionless. If you don't say anything, I mean you agree. Nian blinked, then peacefully slept on the mattress, covering himself with a quilt. Mother box. Why is it moving? How dare it move? I wonder how my aunt is doing. Nian was still holding the starlight flying crown tightly in his arms when he fell asleep. Today, he saw many people on Paradise Island, but he didn't see Aunt Diana. That's right, she hasn't seen her mother for so long, so she has been staying in the palace. Nian thought about it and soon fell into a distant and deep dream. In the middle of the night, the temperature in the main hall continued to drop a few degrees. Nian suddenly felt a chill on his body. Before he opened his eyes, he could faintly smell a familiar fragrance in his nose. It was like a flower bed of violets blooming next to him. Huh? Nian woke up with a start. He opened his eyes wide and stared blankly at his side. A beautiful and mature woman was lying on the mattress beside him. The woman's black, slightly curly hair was casually scattered on the bed. She closed her eyes, and her sword-like eyebrows and eyelashes looked black and thick. Beneath her delicate face, naturally enhanced by beauty enhancement, lay a slender, perfectly proportioned figure. Her proudly shaped breasts rose and fell with her even breathing. From her slender, toned waist, she stretched a pair of long legs, which had to bend and overlap to prevent them from protruding from the bed. She wore a regal, ornate golden royal dress. The bright moonlight shrouded her like a silver veil, making her seem like a deity not of this world, possessing an unreal beauty. As if sensing Nian's awakening and gazing at her, the woman's jewel-like eyes opened slightly, clearly reflecting the young man's face nearby. Auntie, why are you here? Nian thought he was dreaming. Didn't you say this morning that you wanted a hug tonight? Diana said, as if her presence was a matter of course. Morning. Nian suddenly remembered. Actually, he had only said it casually. He hadn't expected his aunt to not only remember it but also come to fulfill his wish at this very moment. An anti-version of Doraemon, you deserve it. Really? Is that okay? His gaze fell on that mermaid-like waist, and Nian felt his heart race. Yes, Diana nodded gently. So, Nian gently placed his hand on his aunt's waist. Nian's first impression was, as befitting the royal attire of the Amazons, the fabric was clearly the finest silk, soft, warm, and smooth, with a hint of strength and toughness. Without a trace of excess fat, one could imagine the healthy color beneath. Nian cherished her even more, not daring to use force, simply holding her gently with one hand, like a ruler measuring her waist. Even though he knew, even with Antiope's power, he couldn't harm his aunt in the slightest. A woman's waist is generally untouchable, and its perception is sometimes even more acute than that of the feet. After all, whether upwards or downwards, it's a crucial area. Nian gently held his Aunt Diana's waist, without any other movements. Perhaps, for now, this was enough. This was already a significant step forward from the previous breakthrough. Nian could feel his aunt's body trembling slightly, and suddenly he felt relieved. He wasn't the only one feeling so nervous and cautious. And, this crown. Nian seemed to remember something and pulled out the starlight flying crown from his bosom. I'll keep it with you for now, Diana whispered. You need it now. Okay, I'll take good care of it. Nian nodded solemnly. After the afternoon's battle, he no longer resisted. If even he himself believed he couldn't bear the weight of this crown, how could he convince the Amazons of Paradise Island that he could bear and protect it in his aunt's future? This afternoon, I actually asked Antiope to specifically fight you. Diana tapped Nian's forehead with a cool finger and said with a tapping laugh, I also trained with Antiope before I awakened my divine power. So, I wanted her to help you with special training. I didn't expect you to hold back at all. Xinian gave a wry smile. He had noticed that Antiope had been holding back. This afternoon was more of a special sparring session than a battle. Otherwise, with Antiope's strength, he wouldn't have lasted more than 2 rounds. For the next few days, you will train with Antiope, Diana instructed. You need to master more combat techniques. That way, when you trigger your familiar master power, you'll be able to better adapt to and control the abilities of others. You won't accidentally break a window at home and lose control of your body like you did last time. Alright, Xinian sighed. It looked like this relaxing and enjoyable trip was completely ruined. If you perform well. Diana pondered for a moment, then suddenly took Xinian's hand, stood up from the mattress, and walked out of the corridor, saying, I'll let you hold me for a while tonight. Xinian's eyes lit up. A goal and motivation suddenly appeared. To better adapt to his physical abilities, to obtain his aunt's limited edition pillow. So, the next morning, when Xinian appeared at the training grounds, excited and full of energy, and offered to teach her, General Antiope herself was a bit bewildered. Despite her bewilderment, Antiope taught Xinian rigorously and diligently. Swordplay, javelin throwing, archery, shield fighting, horseback riding. Even with basic human training, the daily grind still left Xinian exhausted. He could only comfort himself at night by hugging the perfectly tactile pillow. And so, 3 days passed quickly. Diana and Xinian's last day on Paradise Island had finally arrived. Chapter 46 The Eve, God's Presence. Paradise Island. Xinian's 3rd day of training on the island concluded. The sun had sunk halfway below the horizon, and the sea seemed to be ablaze with flames. Tomorrow would be the day Diana and Xinian would leave the island and return to the human world. It would also be the day of the annual Amazon Warrior Competition. This ancient tradition on Paradise Island, which values martial prowess, involves individual cross-country running, swimming, horseback riding, archery, and spear throwing to select the strongest warrior. All the Amazons would gather to watch and celebrate. Regardless of the outcome, the eve of the day on Paradise Island was destined to be different from any other. As General Antiope descended from the mountain where the training grounds were located, she saw Diana, without her crown, her black hair draped over her shoulders, standing at the intersection on her way home. Your Highness Diana. Antiope was about to salute, but Diana stepped forward first. Just like the little girl they once were, Diana took her arm and said with a clever wink, Antiope, how about walking with me? You. Antiope felt a little helpless towards her, but more of a caring heart, so he nodded without hesitation. As night fell, the two of them arrived at the cliffs next to the training ground. Diana said, Antiope, thank you for training and teaching Xinian these days. It's nothing. Teaching him is no different from teaching other Amazons. Antiope shook his head and said in a deep voice, have you really decided? Leaving Paradise Island again tomorrow and returning to the human world outside. Antiope raised his brows and said dissatisfiedly, it's only been 3 days, and that kid has only learned the basics of everything. If you want him to become a real warrior, he needs more time to hone his skills. Diana suddenly burst out laughing and said, Antiope, weren't you very reluctant to teach him in the beginning? Now, why do you want to teach him more? Just like I used to secretly train me when I was a child. Antiope did not comment. I admit that he does have some talent in learning and fighting. Unfortunately, he only has the physique of an ordinary human. No matter how much he trains, he can only improve his self-protection ability a little. Diana said, as long as he has the basics, that's enough. Could it be? Antiope suddenly recalled this strange moment 3 days ago when Xinian had suddenly turned the tables. Antiope paused, then looked at Diana and said, your mother, aren't you going to summon him? Now, compared to a few days ago, some Amazons are gradually accepting him. That's not enough. Diana's beautiful eyes gleamed. Antiope, can you help me with one more thing? Your Highness Diana, please go ahead. Antiope nodded solemnly. Diana said, I want to register Xinian for the warrior competition tomorrow morning. What did you say? Antiope momentarily suspected she had misheard, her face filled with shock. But then she understood. If Xinian could perform well in the warrior competition, he would instantly gain the approval of most Amazons, and the Amazon Queen would be on stage to watch the entire event. However, aside from the fact that Xinian was only a human boy, Even if he had the strength to defeat her 3 days ago, he would never stand out on the competition. In fact, the chances of him making a fool of himself were even higher. After all, tomorrow's competition isn't about one-on-one combat, but a comprehensive display of physical prowess and technical skill. Your Highness, you'll destroy yourself. Antiope couldn't help but cry out. She wasn't worried about Xenian's fate, of course, but Diana and Xenian's relationship was now one of shared success and failure. Even Antiope couldn't imagine the spectacle of a human boy, who had only trained for 3 days, competing against the bravest and most powerful Amazon warriors. It's decided, Diana said softly but firmly, then turned and left, leaving Antiope standing there in a daze. In the ancient circular building, Xenian sat on the bed in the main hall, waiting for Diana's aunt to arrive. Her aunt's nightly rewards had kept him going through the days of rigorous training. After all, who could resist her Wonder Woman-style divine pillow? Plus, the rewards were different each night. The difference lay in her aunt's attire. On the first day, when my aunt arrived, she was wearing golden royal attire, resembling a noble and elegant deity. It made Nian feel that even moving a finger would be blasphemy. And when my aunt appeared the next day, she had changed into a white, knee-length gauze dress, characteristic of ancient Greece. She looked pure and beautiful, like a white peony. The thin, soft fabric of an ordinary gauze dress had a completely different feel from the ornately crafted royal dress. As for the third night, which was last night, my aunt was wearing the same corset top and leather miniskirt she'd used during training. The tight corset only covered half of her upper body, revealing her slender waist with its healthy curves. So, even though the first 3 nights had been simple hugs, there was an indescribable difference between them. Nian felt a surge of anticipation and a burning heat in his heart, and just then, he heard the sound of familiar footsteps in the corridor. He looked up. Diana was wearing a red armor dress for battle tonight, the same outfit she would wear when she transformed into a superhero, with a long sword, a round shield, and other special weapons slung over her back. And, are we leaving Paradise Island? Xenian quickly stood up and asked curiously. No, we'll leave after tomorrow morning. Diana looked straight at him and said, tomorrow morning, you're going to participate in the Amazon warrior competition. Okay. Xenian nodded simply. Do you know what a warrior competition is? Diana raised her heroic eyebrows. Xenian spread his hands and responded bluntly, I vaguely heard some of it from the female warriors, but I'm not sure about the specific content. You don't even know the content, and you promised me. Diana came close to Xenian, gently holding his face with her left hand and asked. Xenian smiled and said, Aunt arranged it, so there must be a reason. It's settled, Diana said confidently. Tomorrow, not only will you participate, but you'll also have to find a way to take first place. That might be a little difficult. Xenian's confidence was seriously lacking. Although he didn't know much about the competition, he knew it was a competition between female warriors. What if this is the case? Diana said, suddenly lowering her proud head. Huh? Xenian's pupils contracted as if the universe were collapsing. He could clearly smell the delicate fragrance of violets nearby, and a hint of exquisite warmth spread from his slightly dry lips. Whoa! Xenian's eyes gradually widened as he took in the stunningly beautiful face so close to him. His eyes suddenly transformed into divine, icy silver. He grasped the familiar slender waist with both hands. His black hair, turning an unreal silver, grew wildly and fell over his shoulders. At this moment, Xenian seemed to have awakened. A surge of invisible demigod power surged outward, shaking off a speck of dust from the nearby mother box. Ability, Master of Familiarity. Triggered. Chapter 47 Semigods Nian. The next morning, as the first golden rays of sunlight fell upon Paradise Island, the main island erupted in activity. Fully armed female warriors, usually engaged in drills or on duty, joined by beautiful civilian women in long white dresses, formed a vast crowd, converging on a large ancient structure on one side of the coast. The structure resembled an open-air ancient arena, with a flat, spacious plaza in the center. Amazons filled the several stone steps surrounding the plaza. Silence. Her Majesty has arrived. Antiope's shout echoed, and the noise in the arena instantly fell silent. Under the gazes of countless adoring, respectful, and devoted people, Queen Hippolyta, the supreme ruler of the Amazons, appeared on a separate platform at one side of the arena, wearing the crown symbolizing power. She sat majestically on the golden throne. Her Royal Highness has arrived. Antiope continued to shout from the platform. Diana, clad in golden royal attire, followed the queen, and every Amazon instinctively glanced upwards. Instead of the silver crown she wore before, she wore a vibrant floral crown, placed atop her dark hair. Your Highness, you actually gave your crown to a human. That's the sacred artifact of the Amazon royal family, the Starlight Crown. The queen actually agreed. Why would such a thing happen? Upon seeing this, the Amazons standing in the arena erupted in discussion, faces filled with shock and bewilderment. For the past few days, only a few Amazons had witnessed this, while the majority had only heard about it. Now, witnessing Diana's replacement crown with a floral crown, they found it difficult to accept. Diana, smiling, stood gracefully beside the queen's seat, her head held high, radiating confidence and beauty. She was still the most powerful and beautiful jewel of the Amazon race. Begin, Queen Hippolyta said calmly, seemingly oblivious to the discussion. Antiope nodded, then immediately leaped from the 10-meter-high platform and announced loudly, the competition is about to begin. Now, invite the contestants to the stage. A tall, muscular female warrior, clad in light leather armor, walked through the arena's gates into the center of the square, enjoying the attention and applause of the Amazons. The 8 participating female warriors lined up in the square. Antiope glanced behind them in surprise. Nian wasn't there. Has she changed her mind? That's all well and good. Antiope breathed a sigh of relief and looked up at Diana on the platform. She saw Diana smiling, still gazing toward the arena's gates, her beautiful eyes gleaming. No. Antiope cried before she could lower her head when the enthusiastic applause in the arena abruptly stopped. From the Amazon Queen to the common Amazons, everyone looked toward the arena's main entrance. There, a figure emerged into the vast arena, just as the entrance timer arrived. Nian, with his long silver hair, wore a white casual dress with tights and a striking crown on his head. Behind him slung an ancient sword with a hilt depicting 2 intertwined dragons. Every Amazon knew that sword, the sword of Vulcan, forged by the god of fire, Hephaestus, a supreme artifact capable of slaying gods. The significance of this sword far surpassed even the flying star crown. The former symbolized Diana's power, the latter her status and honor. Yet, at this moment, both of these exclusive artifacts were possessed by a single human youth. This tournament would not involve actual combat, so the weapons he carried would be largely unused. Therefore, this symbol represented Princess Diana. Queen Hippolyta, observing Nian as he made his final appearance, a flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. She had never expected their first meeting would take place in this setting. In the arena, Antiope glanced at the contestants, including Nian. Now that everyone's here, the competition is about to begin. Wait a minute. Nian suddenly raised his hand, curiously asking, can you tell me about the competition and the rules? A sudden silence fell on the square. The participating female warriors were stunned. They didn't know the content or the rules, so why were they participating? Antiope frowned, suppressed her temper, and raised her hand to explain. It's simple. Starting from the square here, swim through the sea outside and land on the beach on the other side of the island. There are horses prepared on the beach. Use bows and arrows to hit 3 targets set on the road. Finally, whoever returns to the square through the main gate of the arena first and throws their spear over the ring of the arena building will be the winner. Worried that Nian hadn't heard clearly, Antiope said slowly, do you understand? If there's anything you don't understand, I'll explain it to you. No need, let's get started. Nian waved his hand, looking very casual. Antiope, unable to bear watching any longer, gritted her teeth and declared, I declare the competition officially begun. As soon as she finished speaking, except for Nian, who remained standing, the other 8 female warriors rushed out. They climbed the dozens-meter-long ladders erected in front of the square, preparing to use them to reach the sea adjacent to the arena. Seeing Nian motionless, many assumed he had simply given up. Seeing a female warrior almost reach the top, Nian prepared to begin, only to slightly crouch down. The next moment, Antiope's face changed. She could sense that Nian had transformed. His eyes were as sharp and calm as a god, and his aura shifted from harmless to fierce, intimidating presence brimming with tangible energy. Divine power. How is that possible? Antiope exclaimed. Boom. Power flowing through his legs, Nian leaped 20 or 30 meters, landing on the empty ladder's summit. His long silver hair fluttering wildly in the strong wind, Nian sprinted forward, leaping across the 100-meter-wide sea. Tread. He landed in the shallows, then with a single step, the water erupted in a cascade, reaching where horses and bows were prepared. He chose neither horse nor longbow. After all, there was no need. He casually picked up 3 arrows and sprinted up the mountain path, faster than a horse. He spotted his first target along the way. Without stopping, he tossed an arrow barehanded, piercing the wind and striking the bullseye. A plume of blue smoke, representing him, rose into the sky like a wisp of smoke. Unlike the first time he had received his Ents power, perhaps this was a second time, or perhaps the result of days of training. Furthermore, the direct exchange of mediums and the depth of the medium had given him a more complete mastery of the medium's owner's power. At this moment, Nian seemed like a demigod from birth. He continued running along the mountain path, passing the remaining checkpoints with a speed and stamina far superior to that of a human. Inside the arena, although Nian's figure could not be seen, everyone could clearly see 3 blue smoke plumes representing Nian rising from different islands within less than 10 seconds of each other. The Amazons in the arena were stunned, as if witnessing a miracle. Finally, a second color of smoke appeared in the sky. At the same time, at the main entrance of the arena, stirring up a cloud of dust, the demigod Nian rushed into the square with an afterimage. From departure to return, it took less than a minute. Finally, let's finish this. Nian approached the still-dazed Antiope, took the half-ready spear from her hand, and threw it with all his might towards the golden ring in front of him. Wait, the ritual isn't complete yet. Antiope exclaimed in shock. But it was too late. The spear transformed into a stream of light, piercing the air. Gurgle. At this moment, a golden goddess statue rose from the center of the square. The spear thrown by Nian hit it directly in the chest and pierced through its back. The spear deflected without slowing down, knocking off a corner of the metal ring, sparks flying, and then disappeared into the distant sky. Did I do something bad? Nian looked at the empty hole in the center of the goddess statue and touched the back of his head embarrassedly. Queen Diana. All Amazons. Chapter 48 Return to the real world. At midday, the sun hung like a ball of fire high in the blue sky. Outside Paradise Island, a massive cruise ship, fresh from a 5-day cruise, was returning. Braving the cool, damp sea breeze, a stunning beauty in a white dress with an off-the-shoulder slit and a youth, dressed in his modern uniform, returned to the side of the third deck, unnoticed by the tourists. Auntie, I'm sorry, I messed up. Nian drooped his ears like a little emperor. He had seen the Amazon Queen's livid, grim face that morning. After all, that was the heaviest loss Paradise Island had ever suffered in 1,000 years. Just be more careful next time, Diana said softly, without blaming him. Next time for sure. But will I get another chance? Nian's mouth twitched, his mind replaying Antiope's unconcealed rage and the stunned expressions of the female warriors and civilians. Would he be beaten up if he went to Paradise Island again? Of course not. Diana smiled slightly, looking at the sea that was getting farther and farther away, and whispered, "They have actually recognized you and are very welcome to come next time. Later, I will take you to the palace to meet the Queen Mother." Nian looked at the profile of Diana's aunt, and his heart began to beat again. His aunt was already very beautiful, and when she smiled, she was even more beautiful and charming. The corners of her lips, which outline an alluring arc, reminded Nian of the unspeakable scene last night. A warm current like an electric shock spread from the corners of his mouth, spreading little by little, quickly infecting every part of his body. A gentle kiss, and he stepped into the extraordinary. Nian, who had entered demigod mode, opened his silver eyes wide and looked at Wonder Woman, whose face was calm and natural. Consider it a reward for holding me in your arms tonight." Raising her head slightly, Wonder Woman's unsteady voice betrayed a lack of composure, as if speaking to herself. "But this is also so you can inherit my power." Yes, that's all. Whether or not this was self-deception, it was nonetheless a valid reason. One that allowed her to feel at ease in this moment, a justification for briefly crossing that line. "So that's how it is." Nian muttered to himself, his divine silver eyes concealing a fiery inner passion. He suddenly said, "Not enough." "What?" Wonder Woman was startled, staring blankly at Nian. "Not enough mediums." Nian was perfectly calm, suddenly standing on tiptoe, holding on to the tenderness that had opened slightly in surprise. "Really? Not enough mediums? There's nothing we can do." Wonder Woman's eyes were equally calm. She exhaled a breath of hot air with a hint of resignation, then lowered her head without stopping him, offering something softer and sweeter. A bright, silvery moonlight fell into the main hall. On the stone altar, the mother box, resting for 1,000 years, remained silent. Returning to Washington. After a quick tidying up, Diana went out to work. Diana's job changed every few years. Previously, Nian hadn't understood the reason, but now he understood. With his aunt's ageless constitution, if she stayed in one place for several years, even with divine powers and magic to hide her, her unusual nature might be exposed. Fortunately, with Diana's exceptional qualifications, finding a job wasn't a problem. She currently appeared to be a shareholder in a prominent private law firm in Washington. After taking a shower at home, Nian finally turned on his phone, which had been off for 5 days. The instant he turned it on, the screen was bombarded with countless messages. He was so startled that he almost thought it was infected with a virus. Before he could check his phone, the doorbell rang. Curious, Nian opened the door and saw a sturdy, white young man standing at his door, clutching a pet bag. Perhaps from a lack of sleep, the other person looked a bit listless, with noticeable dark circles under his eyes. "Who are you?" Without waiting for a question, the white young man began to flutter his hands and feet, his body movement strange, and he spoke incoherently. "Hello. Is this the Prince residence? Where Miss Diana Prince lives? My name is Barry Allen." Barry Allen. Nian remembered. He remembered his aunt saying she'd leave the little emperor with a friend for a few days. "This is yours, right?" Barry unzipped the pet bag in his arms, and suddenly, a small orange figure pounced out. "Wait." Barry was startled and about to use his powers. But he soon realized that the orange figure, far from darting into the young man's arms with no ill intentions, kept rubbing its head against his armpit, making a nagging meow like a real cat. "Ha ha ha, little emperor, how are you these days?" Nian couldn't help but laugh, reaching out and rubbing its soft furry head vigorously. Barry stared at the harmless little cat with his eyes wide open. If he hadn't spent the past few days battling wits and courage with the little creature, coupled with his super speed and fearlessness of the devouring essence ability, even if it still took a lot of effort, he would have almost thought it was just an ordinary kitten. "Well, you know what's special about it, right?" Barry asked directly. Nian looked at the cute and coquettish little emperor in his arms and nodded without hiding anything. "Okay. Now that it's safe and sound with you, that's all very well." Barry breathed a sigh of relief and prepared to turn and leave, waving, "I'll be leaving first." "Wait." Nian stopped him, smiling and extending his hand. "My name is Nian Prince." "Thank you very much. It must be tiring to take care of this little guy." "Well, he's quite endearing." Glancing at Xiao Wang, Barry shook Nian's hand and said quickly and sincerely, "Besides, Miss Diana once helped my father, so it's only natural for me to help take care of a pet." "Nian, right? My home isn't far from here, just over on Center Street, at number 26. If you have the chance, you're welcome to visit me someday." "I'll remember that, little brother. I'll bring Nian to see you someday." Nian waved goodbye. Xiao Wang, forget it." "Of course, I'd still welcome you to come." Barry's eye twitched. He watched Barry enter the elevator and leave. Nian blinked, lowered his head to the little emperor in his arms, and said, "He's a really good person, isn't he?" "Meow." The little emperor cried indignantly, as if to express that he couldn't beat him. "So, he's also someone with extraordinary powers." Nian pondered. After all he had been through, encountering extraordinary people was no longer surprising to him. After all, who in the family wasn't extraordinary now? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 New Year, Departure to New York. Placing Xiao Wang on the sofa nearby, Nian leaned back in the comfort of his soft back and opened his phone to check the messages he hadn't checked earlier. The barrage of messages came mostly from Twitter, with some text messages thrown in. Nian wasn't particularly popular at school. The only person who'd gone out of their way to find him on Twitter and send him a viral barrage of messages was his childhood sweetheart, Gwen. He quickly scrolled through the messages. Gwen's initial messages were filled with Christmas greetings and photos of family and personal holidays. He flicked through the photos. This photo of Gwen in pink bunny pajamas looked pretty good, quite pleasing to the eye. Nian unceremoniously saved it. Meanwhile, Gwen, noticing his unusual lack of response, sent a message to confirm his safety and called. On the third day, Gwen briefly believes Nian had disappeared. Officer George, driven by his daughter's concerns, checked and discovered that Nian's family had gone abroad. It seemed Officer George had him completely on his tail. Nian gave a wry smile and quickly replied, "Sorry, Gwen. I worried you. My aunt and I went on vacation, and in a hurry, I forgot to tell you." He'd barely clicked send when Gwen replied in less than half a second, "HMPH. If apologies were enough, what would the police be for? I need sincere compensation. Okay, you'll state your terms when the time comes, and I'll satisfy you if I can." Knowing he was in the wrong, Nian readily agreed. "Gwen, that's right. I'll think about the terms carefully. Don't try to cheat when the time comes." "Okay," Nian replied, then continued scrolling through his other Twitter messages. He noticed that his junior, Kara Danvers, had also sent him a Christmas Eve message. However, there hadn't been another one since then. The last update on Kara's personal Twitter account was 5 days ago, Christmas Eve, and it seemed she hadn't been online since then. She's not going on vacation abroad either. Nian pondered for a moment, then tapped the screen to reply. He apologized and explained why he hadn't replied, then added a belated Christmas greeting. Finally, he inquired about the other person's health and travel status. A show of concern as a senior. After 3 consecutive times, Nian looked through the class discussion group messages again and discovered that the instructor had updated the class schedule. The group trip, originally scheduled for mid-January, had been moved up to January 1st, New Year's Day. And today was the penultimate day of 2011. Wasn't it a week of Christmas break, a day of classes, and then a 3-day group trip to New York? Nian was speechless. He still had some doubts about traveling. He thought, as long as it was truly a trip, it would be fine. It shouldn't be like the previous 2 so-called trips, where you were forced to save the world or undergo grueling training, which was far from the purpose of travel, which was fun and relaxing. After reading and responding to the messages on Twitter, Nian was bored and started browsing the online news. Seeing this, Nian's eyes widened in surprise, and he subconsciously straightened his back, sitting upright on the sofa. His expression was solemn as he quickly scrolled through the news on his phone. During the few days Nian spent on Paradise Island, 2 news stories were trending online. The first was about the superhero Captain America, Steve Rogers. Following the death of former U.S. Secret Service agent Peggy Carter, Captain America, having been revived from the iceberg after disappearing for over 70 years, made his public debut as one of the pallbearers. While his generation's lovers had aged and their bodies had passed away, Captain America, the first superhero to break through the boundaries of humanity, remained as young as a young man in his early 20s. Without peers and comrades to fight alongside, a promise could never be fulfilled, a truly cruel fate for a superhero. Having transcended time and arrived in the 21st century, Captain America's future was a question of his destiny. The second was about the mortal god of Metropolis, Superman. Ever since his rise to fame against Kryptonian warships and forces a year and a half ago, Superman has been using his superhuman powers to aid humanity, earning him worship as a deity by many. But the tide of fallacies has completely shifted in recent days. Due to excessive damage to buildings and accidental injuries to humans, some citizens of Metropolis have begun public protests, and the Metropolitan Court has announced that it will publicly summon Superman for trial. The trial is set for January 2nd of next year. Superman, the superhero, is likely to be convicted and imprisoned. After reading these 2 major news items, Nian couldn't help but frown. More and more superhumans are emerging and resurrecting in the world. The superhumans can only fight the superhumans with the superhumans, but the superhumans are feared and questioned by ordinary people. Earth is plagued by internal and external troubles, like the invisible trend of the times. Should I prepare some precautions? Nian muttered to himself, looking at the little emperor sleeping soundly on the sofa next to him. The young devourer, the dormant venom. If he didn't count his aunt, it was clearly not a safe situation. Nian fell into thought. No matter what, he had to protect those around him. Under this premise, he was fearless, whether the opponent was an old god, an alien, a superhuman, or even a monster. 2 days later, January 1st, New Year's Day. It was the first day of 2012. The weather was clear and sunny. January is usually the coldest month, but this year, the global climate seemed to be out of whack, with temperatures rising steadily from the very start of the new year. The temperature outside felt more like autumn, and many students shed their heavy windbreakers and jackets. Around noon, a school bus painted a striking yellow pulled up at the middle school gate. A male instructor, a megaphone in hand, stood at the gate and shouted, "Classmates, hurry up! Grab your belongings and find your seats." Students filed out of the school building and boarded the bus. "Nian, what are you doing? Get on the bus!" the male instructor suddenly shouted. "I'm coming." Nian hurried out of the building, backpack slung over his shoulder. He had just stopped by Kara's classroom and discovered she wasn't in class that day. Kara hadn't responded to his messages since Christmas Eve, and she had been on sick leave from school. This undoubtedly made people a little worried. When Nian got on the bus, he glanced at the thermos cup in the male instructor's hand, and the corner of his eye twitched slightly. Why put something else on the rim of the thermos cup, but had to put a photo of him from behind in women's clothing when he was fighting abomination? Who could stand this? Nian sighed, and just as he entered the school bus, he saw Gwen waving at him from a seat slightly to the back. The seat next to her, which made the boys and girls in the class jealous, was occupied by his small school bag. Nian immediately waved and went to the seat next to Gwen. "Everyone sit tight, get ready to go." With the male instructor's deep and powerful reminder, Nian's New York trip will also kick off. Chapter 50. Gwen wants compensation. Beep. The bus horn blared a signaling whistle, and the school bus slowly started to move out of the school gate, merging into the main thoroughfare leading to New York City. On the bus, the students, watching the city scenes pass by on both sides, could hardly contain their excitement and joy, whispering and discussing among themselves. "Quiet down. Students, please be quiet for a moment." The instructor, accompanied by a young teacher, stood on the bus stop platform next to the driver's seat. He put down the thermos with a photo of the silver-haired goddess on it and shouted into the noisy car through a megaphone. The students on the bus immediately quieted down, looking curiously at the young teacher they had never seen before. Gwen, the class monitor, clearly knew more information. She whispered to Nian, "That's the new assistant instructor." The instructor, with his somewhat macho demeanor, grinned and said, "Everyone, I'm sure you all know who I am. But let me introduce myself again. I'm the instructor for this class, Roth Harrington. You can call me Mr. Harrington, or just instructor." Roth Harrington clapped his hands enthusiastically. "I'm in charge of arranging all matters for this class outing. I'm both the teacher and the guide. If you have any questions, just come to me. Don't be shy. Also, let me tell you a secret, I'm a big fan of the silver-haired goddess." Instructor Roth chuckled. She'd even stuck a photo directly on her thermos. Who wouldn't know that secret? Roth's final joke immediately elicited laughter from the students in the car, breaking down the barriers between him and many of them and bringing them closer. In one of the back seats, Nian slapped his forehead, a look of despair on his face. "That's not necessary, that's not necessary. By the way, let me introduce you all." Instructor Roth, having struck a friendly tone, immediately patted the young man standing next to him. "This is my temporary assistant, and the deputy instructor for this class trip. Introduce yourself to the students," Instructor Roth said, raising an eyebrow. The young man, sporting a hint of sexy stubble, nodded. He stepped forward, standing where the students' gazes were fixed. His expression suddenly grew serious as he opened his arms. "Hello, my name is Quentin Beck. You can also call me Mysterio, but I'm actually a time traveler from a parallel universe." The students on the bus were stunned. Nian's eyes widened, staring intently at the young man. Could it be that he'd run into someone from the same hometown? Bang! Instructor Roth patted Quentin Beck's head and explained with a look of resignation, "Everyone, please forgive your deputy instructor. He's a bit of a chunibao." Quentin Beck smiled and said, "How was my acting just now? It was quite realistic, wasn't it? My childhood dream was to be an actor, a Hollywood stuntman." The students looked at each other, unsure how to respond. "Don't look at him like that," Instructor Roth said, smoothing things over. "He's recently been applying for a position at Stark Industries. Maybe soon after he finishes his job as your deputy instructor, He'll join Stark Industries as a technician. Stark Industries? Technician? Upon hearing this, the students applauded with admiration and longing. At Stark Industries, no matter the position, they were among the best in the world. Most importantly, the salary was guaranteed to be high. And the title of technician was definitely more valuable than a university professorship. Nian subconsciously touched his nose. It seemed as if he had banished that Stark Industries boss to another dimension. Although, at that time, he was in a 3-in-1 state. After the two instructors finished introducing themselves and mingled harmoniously with the students, the school bus quickly drove onto the highway, and the interior began to gradually quiet down. School buses are not as fast as planes or trains, and it takes at least 3 or 4 hours to reach New York. The curtains on the windows on both sides of the bus were drawn, and the light inside the bus immediately dimmed a lot. Many students closed their eyes to sleep or played with their phones. The only sound in the quiet was the sound of the school bus moving. Nian had originally wanted to lie down and take a nap. At this time, Gwen, who was sitting next to him, leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Remember what we agreed on the day before yesterday." The day before yesterday. Nian was stunned for a moment, but then he quickly remembered that Gwen wanted to make amends. "What compensation do you want? Tell me." Nian nodded happily. "Childhood sweetheart, after all, they are brothers. I think I twisted my ankle when I got on the bus just now. It hurts a little." Gwen blushed slightly and whispered in a low voice, a little embarrassed. "It's just a small thing, how can it be considered compensation? Put your feet up here, and I'll rub them for you," Nian said without giving it much thought. Gwen hesitated, then bit her lower lip slightly, her mind firmed up. A beautiful girl with short blonde hair sat in the window seat. She turned sideways, her back to the drawn window, and reached down to remove her short black boots. She gently tugged at the hem of her denim shorts, lifted her legs, bent them, and gently placed them on Nian's legs in the seat next to her. Nian was stunned. In fact, he'd sensed something was wrong the moment Gwen removed her boots. Perhaps it was the warmer weather. Today, Gwen was wearing a dress top and denim shorts, with her feet wrapped in warm black tights. So, when Nian looked down, he could see the girl's beautiful legs, tightly wrapped in thin tights. Nian wasn't a foot fetishist. But at that moment, his heart suddenly raced, and his eyes lit up with a hint of wonder. Gwen's legs were naturally slender. A closer look revealed her calves to be even more slender and straight, with a perfectly graceful curve from leg to ankle. But the most beautiful part of her legs was something Nian hadn't usually seen, her delicate, dainty feet. Encased in fine black silk, her fingers shimmered like jewels, their curves flawless, a perfection surpassing a work of art. "Right there, I twisted it," Gwen said thoughtfully, pointing to her right ankle. "I know." Nian took a deep breath to calm himself. "Gwen is my brother, Gwen is my brother." Nian muttered to himself, then reached out and grasped Gwen's right foot without hesitation. The girl's foot was so small that his hand could encompass it completely, like a cool, smooth gem. Nian, with unwavering enthusiasm, gently grasped the girl's delicate foot and began massaging it. Gwen's face flushed with shame, and she felt that what he had just proposed was a bit too bold. The moment Nian grasped and massaged her feet, the girl's body stiffened, and she felt a strong shock like an electric shock in her feet. Wait. Gwen bit her lip, almost unable to resist jumping out of her seat. Exclamation mark. Popular animal knowledge. Spiders' feet are the most sensitive. Because there are sensitive vibration receptors on their thighs, spiders can detect any slight movement from the spider silk under their feet. Bang! The school bus suddenly shook violently, waking up many students. The driver's apologetic voice came, "Sorry, students, we are going too fast." End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.